Good afternoon. It is 1:30 on April 21st, 2026. I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order. I will begin by referring to the land acknowledgement policy of the Municipality of Jasper. That policy provides that our land acknowledgement need not be done at every meeting, but that it should be done when it is meaningful and appropriate. Today, the Jasper National Park Indigenous Forum is being conducted, the opening ceremony of which is concurrent with this particular meeting. That opening ceremony is being held at the Indigenous Cultural Site on the shores of the Moline River. Council had been invited to attend the opening ceremony, but that invitation regretfully conflicted with our duties to be here for this scheduled meeting. The municipality is, however, ably represented by municipal staff who are present at the opening ceremony, and in these circumstances, I find that it is certainly meaningful and appropriate that I begin this meeting by acknowledging that the municipality of Jasper is on Treaty 6 and 8 territories, as well as the Jasper House Métis District. This land is the traditional territory, meeting ground, gathering place, traveling route, and home for the Denza, Assiniwitsi Winawak, Assiniwitsi Niha, Nahayawak, Anishinaabe, Secwepemc, Iyithka Wichistabi, the Mountain Métis, and the Métis. The municipality of Jasper acknowledges the land to honor the relationship Indigenous peoples have with this land, to remind us of our responsibility and obligations to this place and to Indigenous peoples, and to affirm our accountability to address the ongoing impacts of colonization that continue to affect Indigenous peoples. I will turn now to agenda item 2. Councillors, you have before you today's proposed agenda. Are there any deletions, additions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? Seeing nothing, I would look for a motion from any councillor that council approve the agenda for today's meeting as presented. Councillor Melnick, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Agenda item 3, approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes for approval today, beginning with the regular meeting minutes of April 7th, 2026. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Seeing no indication, I would look for a motion that council approve the minutes of the April 7, 2026 regular council meeting as presented. Councillor Waxer, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We also have before us the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of April 14th, 2026. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Again, seeing nothing, I would look for a motion that council approve the minutes of the April 14, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting as presented. Deputy Mayor Frechette, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 4, delegations. We have 2 scheduled delegations, and we will go through those first, and then I would remind individuals in the gallery that I will invite anyone who wishes to speak as a delegation to any item on the agenda to come forward and do so. When we get to that, and I will remind you again at the time, I will ask that you identify yourself by name and also the agenda item that you wish to speak to. We have one councillor who has declared a conflict with respect to one item on the agenda, and he may want to absent himself if anyone is speaking to that particular agenda item. As I say, we'll come back to that. I want to begin then with a really happy bit of business for council today, and that is the Mayor's Recognition Awards. The municipality has a policy. It is the Mayor's Recognition Awards and Special Award, and it indicates that council will recognize significant achievements of or important volunteer service by individual teams or groups whose efforts and accomplishments have enhanced the image of or have made a significant contribution to the municipality of Jasper. We also have administrative procedures that back up that policy, and those procedures indicate that the recognition awards will honor recipients in 3 categories, that is athletics, fine and performing arts, or distinguished voluntary service. We receive nominations by March 1st of each year. We receive those from the public. And although they are called the Mayor's Recognition Awards, in fact, it is council who is the arbiter of the nominations and selects the recipients, which is, as I say, a very happy duty, sometimes though conflicting, because we do often receive a great many nominations. This year, we received nominations and council considered all of them and is very happy to be in a position today to award 3 separate awards, all in the realm of distinguished voluntary service. And we will kind of play this by ear, but I think the intent is that we want to individually honor each of the recipients. So I will read some of the information that council received in order to make its decision, and then I will invite recipients up to receive their reward. And we have a new backdrop being displayed here in council chambers for the first time, I think, and we will do our best to take photographs of each recipient in front of that backdrop. And then perhaps at the end, if everybody sticks around, we will take a photo of everyone together. I'm going to begin with one of the recipients, not in any particular order. And I will say that in each case, all 3 of the recipients were indicated in the nomination forms as champions. And indeed, they are all champions of the municipality of Jasper in one form or another. The first recipient that I will speak of is one of the founding members of the Jasper Artists Guild. For over 25 years, he has championed the fine arts in Jasper, including being instrumental in the creation of the Jasper Artists Guild and the Jasper Art Gallery. He is also a teacher in a variety of media, an artist himself, the winner of the Raving About the Arts Award way back in 2012. He is widely recognized in Jasper as one of the primary faces of the arts in Jasper, and council is delighted to recognize the efforts of Greg Deagle as a community champion. And so, Greg, I will invite you up. And as council is the arbiter of these awards, I will invite council up. Get a picture with. I can't walk away from my mic and keep speaking. So we will all gather around the recipient and get a photograph taken. And Bob, you might want to move some of the. I appreciate that. I can keep no secret about the names, even though I won't mention the name until the end. You'll all know, but I am going to assume that you will wait and hold the applause until you hear the name. Our next recipient has spearheaded a multi-decade effort to advocate for the Jasper Skate Park. And again, he has championed fundraising and a long-term vision to improve our community. He has been the driving force behind the new skate park and has been an inspiration to skateboarders in Jasper and to the community generally for such a long period of time. He's worked year in and year out, as I say, over a number of decades, with a dream of eventually having Jasper favored with a concrete skate park. In addition to all of those efforts, he has helped so many people with their confidence and their skills over the same number of years. It is truly amazing that he's been able to keep at it as long as he has and still retain the enthusiasm which he brought initially to the project. He deserves this award in so many ways. He's been such a fixture in the skateboarding community, and his impact has been enormous and will continue for years and years to come. In fact, his legacy is now cemented in Jasper. And so I welcome Daryl Savage. Our third recipient, also a champion in our community over decades. She has selflessly given her time, her energy, and her leadership to so many organizations within our community. She is involved with the Jasper Senior Society. She works diligently to create a weekly newsletter of upcoming events and program offerings so our senior community can stay in touch with what's going on. She had a very long history with the Jasper High School Band Parents Association. She has been an integral part of the Jasper Park Tennis Club. She's a trustee of the Jasper United Church, a part of their ministry and personnel committee. She's also been involved in the Jasper Seniors Housing Society and is currently engaged with respect to the use of the lands, on the church lands that are looking to be repurposed for community benefit. She has been associated with the Jasper Yellowhead Museum and Archives, She has spearheaded their major fundraising drive, the annual Festival of Trees, the biggest fundraiser that the museum has. She gets her hands dirty, sorting bottles and cans that come in, the recycling effort to help boost the museum and its fundraising is hard work, and she takes it on with a smile on her face, as she always does. And we appreciate the difficult time that you've had recently, and we offer our condolences. But it does not stop us at all from pausing to honor the fantastic contribution that you have made to this community. One of your nominators indicates that you are a yes person, and any idea is greeted with the phrase, "We can do that." Council adopted that strategy when it looked at the nomination. We said, yes, we can do that. Council is very happy to provide the Mayor's Recognition Award for Distinguished Voluntary Service to Ann Thomas. All right, from that happy and somewhat unusual agenda item, we get to return to the more mundane parts of our agenda. Not to discredit our next presenter in any way, but I will turn now to agenda item 4.2, and we have a presentation from Accurate Assessment Group with respect to local assessments, and I would call forward Mr. Troy Birtles.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Mundane, Mr. Mayor. I'm just kidding. I'm sure most of you will find it quite boring. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to come and present to council. Um, some of you have met me before and some of you have not. My name is Troy Birtles. I am your appointed assessor. Oh, I've been the appointed assessor in Jasper for, I should know the number, but I don't, quite a few years. And annually, I'm invited to present to you folks to give you an update with regards to what has happened year over year on your assessment base. Oops, did I hit the wrong button? There we go. So to give a little bit of an idea of what we're going to talk about this afternoon, for those of you that haven't met me, I'm going to give you a little bit of information or an introduction to the company that I work for. The bulk of the meeting today is regarding the, as I mentioned, year over year assessment changes. And with that, how it relates to assessment shifting, which comes to you folks because you, if you haven't already, very soon will be setting your tax rates that get applied to the individual assessments. So there's some pertinent information in there. And then I want to give you a little bit of an update on assessment complaints and what's next. As I mentioned, a quick introduction to our company. This is a map of Alberta. The green shaded areas are our municipal client partners. We're very proud of this map. We have a wide, very diverse client base that helps us contemplate any issues that we might come across in all the different municipality types, including Jasper. And this slide I include, I mention it every year, and I probably will continue to mention it. I want you folks to look at me and our company as your trusted advisors for all things assessment. If you have any questions about how an assessment is calculated or what the procedure is or what the legislation is, I prefer you come to me so that I can give you the correct answer. Not saying that you can't find it yourself, but sometimes folks like to look it up online and ask AI what the answer is, and you don't always get the right answer. So I am very much open to any questions from council or administration that in any situation where I can help. Quick list of some of the staff. This is not a holistic list of our the staff at Accurate Assessment, and the purpose for me including this is so that when I win the lottery, you will still be covered in terms of assessment. You're not going to be left high and dry. So this is really the crux of what we're talking about today. It gives you an idea of the change from last year's assessment by category to this year's assessment by category. And then off to the right, you'll see the dollar and percentage difference. This, at this stage in the presentation, is inclusive of growth, so new construction. And I'm going to break that down for you in a little bit to give you a better understanding how that reacted this year. Just a quick visualization. Actually, I'm going to go back once here. You'll note that exempt increased by quite a large percentage. You might ask why. That's all of your interim housing. So buildings like this building, the aquatic center, all of those schools, churches, they're all exempt. This year, the interim housing projects were added to the exempt category, and that's why it's such a significant increase. And then the line item above that, the industrial designated industrial property, has looks to be a major decrease in terms of percentage, but really from a total assessment based perspective, that's very insignificant. And that line there is assessments that are calculated by the province. Just by definition, they're designated industrial property. So the province has a handful of properties throughout the municipality that they are responsible for. Just to give you a different perspective, with regards to each assessment class. And then I show this in a couple different ways. I like these ones because it gives you a long-term history of the assessment changes. And you'll note the blue line or the blue bars are your residential assessment. And, way back 20 years ago, the total base was a lot less than it is now. In fact, about a third of what it is now. And more recently, you can note that the 2023, 24, and 25 years, obviously last year we saw a major dip in the totals, and for reasons we all are well aware of why that is, obviously is a loss in true growth due to the wildfire. And then I show you this again, and this is all categories combined. So in Jasper, we recognize a very steady market growth each year, meaning people pay a little bit more money each year than they did the year before for property. And that needs to be reflected in assessments. And that's why year over year, generally, we see a little bit higher numbers. In Jasper, we're not affected by, I shouldn't say 100% not affected by the price of oil and gas, but far less than, small town northern Alberta. For example, if the price of oil drops, the value of residential property in northern Alberta generally drops. Jasper, we don't see that. The supply and demand pulls differently here, right? We can't just increase the supply when we want to. So I want to give you a little bit of an understanding with regards to how your ratepayers are going to be affected by these changes. And this chart essentially shows you that almost 80% of your properties are either going to have little to no change up to a 10% change. So it's not a huge number from an assessment perspective. And I'll talk a little bit a little later on with regards to how that might affect somebody's tax bill. Then I just give you another distribution. So this shows it quite clearly that the vast majority of your ratepayers are in that 1 to 10% difference in assessment. And then I essentially show you the same thing in a dollar perspective. The majority of the properties are, again, in that little to no change up to $100,000 change in assessment. And similarly, a bar graph showing you the dispersion across the valuation range. This map is just simply a heat map that shows you by color the change in assessment of the last few slides. So the light red shaded ones are those ones that are 1 to 10%. The darker ones are the ones that are higher value changes. So for example, if last year you had a vacant lot and that's what your assessment was in 2024, and then you started reconstruction in 2025, that is different than the typical market change. So the growth is included in that assessment. So you'll see sporadically throughout there, you'll have some darker red spots. That's generally what is causing that on the residential perspective anyways. Distribution of residential assessed values. So we start close, to the bottom, the $200,000 to $400,000 category. That would be condos, some of the mobile homes in the area of town. The $400,000 to $600,000 would be your older, smaller residential properties. 6 to 8 is generally your typical town site, and then as you get further up the list, your bigger, newer Lake Edith falls in there in the greater than $2 million category. Just gives you an idea of where the majority of your residential payers are situated on the range. And then again, I'll show you the same thing from the non-residential perspective. So you might ask, well, why is there so many non-residential assessed values that are $0 to $500,000? Well, that's all of the approved home accommodations, right? So if you've got an $800,000 assessment and one room of a PHA, you'll have a $40,000 commercial assessment and a $760,000 residential assessment. So that $40,000 piece falls into that first category. And then it's, it moves throughout the spectrum, and to the far right, the greater than $10 million would be your hotel properties. So I mentioned earlier that I wanted to break down a little bit between inflation and growth. So this is that chart. I do recognize that there's a lot of numbers on here. So essentially this is the municipality broken down into different geographic areas. I show you the previous assessed value, the new assessed values, and then what portion is attributed to inflation and what portion is attributed to real growth. So for example, the top line, the residential town site, we saw 5% inflationary increases and 4% in new construction. And we are all, I don't have to remind you, but we all know that in Jasper, generally speaking, we'll have 1 or 2 new homes a year. So our new growth is limited. That's not going to be the case for the next handful of years as the rebuild takes place. So the growth numbers are going to be far higher than we've seen in the past. Nothing else really earth-shattering on that slide. This particular slide speaks to the inflationary changes. So why do I change an assessment year over year? Just because somebody pays more money for property. I'll just dive into that for a bit. So the province audits our assessments, and their first test is a measure between the assessment and the sale price on all properties that sold. So an assessed value of $500,000 sold for $500,000, they calculate that ratio. That's a 100% ratio. Assessment of $500,000, but it sold for $600,000, divide one by the other, that's a 83% or so ratio. Okay, so the province does that for every single transaction, calculates that ratio, lines them up from highest to lowest, and the middle one, or the median ratio, must fall between 95 and 105%. That's their first test. If that happens, then we can go on to the second step, which is how far from that median is it reasonable to expect all of the other ratios to be? So the smaller that range, the better the assessment in their analysis. So between 95 and 105%, and for residential properties, that spread needs to be less than 15. So I show you this chart because I again break the municipality down into different geographic areas, and I show you the sales, and I calculate that median ratio for you, and that's in the second column. So you can see that they're all, where there are sales, they're all between the 95 and 105% threshold. So if you go down to the very bottom, 100.1% is the overall median. So that meets the tests from audit. Then I wanted to give you a little bit of perspective in terms of what next year might look like if today was the day we hit the button, meaning no more sales comes in. You got to keep in mind that this is July. These numbers are July 2024 to July 2025 for a current assessment. So next year's assessment would be July 2025 to July 2026. So any sales that occur in that period are used for next year's assessment. So if we said we're in August right now and we have all the sales, the far two columns are what we would be creating the assessment based on. So on the residential town site, the median improved ratio is 99%. So that tells me we're not moving a whole lot. Find one that's a little different. For example, condos is 97.4%. So that tells me there's a slight uptick. Perhaps the condos might go up a little bit more next year. And again, we still have to compile all of the transactions that are going to come up until July. And generally, we have more in May, June, July than we do in January, February, March. Just seasonally, that's a thing across the province. So that's more a for your information page. I do want to talk about shifting because you have some tools to mitigate shifting from a tax perspective between res and non-res, but you really don't have any tools to mitigate shifting between individual assessment classes. For example, all residential properties in the municipality have the same tax rate. All non-residential properties in the municipality have the same tax rate. You can shift the tax rates of the two, but you can't create a different tax rate for Cabin Creek as opposed to the town site. They all get the same one. Each individual assessment changes, of course, based on what I calculate, but the tax rate itself cannot it's consistent. So from a non-residential perspective, I want to speak to the hotels. So essentially, we use the income approach for all non-residential assessments in Jasper, which means value equals net operating income divided by cap rate. Cap rate is calculated by sales of properties, known NOIs, and that way we can apply the cap rate to properties that haven't sold as long as we have the ability to calculate a net operating income. That doesn't mean how many t-shirts and hamburgers you sell. It means how much you pay to rent the space that you occupy. Okay? So McDonald's, I'll use that because we don't have a McDonald's here, but let's say McDonald's occupies 2,000 square feet and they pay $40 a square foot in rent. I can now calculate what their net operating income is. And if I know the cap rate is 5%, I just divide the NOI by the cap rate and that's the value. That's pretty simple. It doesn't matter how many Big Macs they sell at all. So it's the space and what it could rent for. Now, hotels are a little bit different because it does matter how many rooms they rent. Okay, the business is the real estate on a hotel property. So it's the same formula for value. It's just the income is now directly tied to how well their business is operating. So in this last year on the assessment, we noted that the hotel sector is coming out of the wildfire better than, I don't know if it's better than expected, but they're coming out of it good. And you also need to remember that we're coming out of COVID. Last year or the year before, you'll recall that I presented, we were coming out of COVID quite nicely. So all of these things are showing us that the revenues at the hotel properties are higher, meaning the calculated NOI is higher, meaning the assessed values are higher. Okay, now let's just pin that for a second and look at the rest of the non-residential assessment base. So all your restaurants and your stores, offices, where it's not the business, it's the real estate, and their rent, their $40 square foot rent is still $40. It's not 45 because of the wildfire. It's not 45 because more people are coming here. It's still $40. It's a long-term rent. So the cap rate that gets applied to the same rent as before the wildfire is presenting a very similar assessment on that part of it. So now you get to see why I'm speaking to assessment shifting within non-res. You have your holistic non-res assessment base. Restaurants and hotel and retail stores are staying the same. Your hotels are going up a little bit. So if you maintain the exact same tax rate as you did last year, these folks are going to pay the same. These folks are going to pay a little bit more. If you try to mitigate this a little bit, these guys will pay a little bit less and these guys will pay a little bit more. So you don't have a lever to pull that says, let's do this and make them be equal. The Municipal Government Act just doesn't allow for that. So that's within the non-res class. Now, if we park that and go and look at the residential class, we recognize that the entire residential base increased by about 8%, and your entire non-residential base increased by about 5%. So now you have the ability to mitigate that change because you can set a different tax rate for res, or you do, and a different tax rate for non-res. I am not here to preach to how you set your tax rates. That's entirely your job. I just the purpose of today's presentation is to let you know that there is this shifting occurring in your assessment base. And honestly, I think that you should be cognizant of the changes. I kind of went forward and didn't forward my slides. So yeah, so overall residential is up 8.4%, and the non-residential is up 5%. So that's a shifting between the classes. And then as I spoke earlier, there's the shifting within the non-res class. Assessment complaints. So far, we've had one assessment complaint filed for this year, and it's been dealt with and resolved. As we all know, property owners have the ability to file a complaint if they have an issue with the assessment. Step number one is contact the administration office and say, hey, I don't like what's going on here. And they say, here, I'll let Troy give you a call. So I look up their details and give them a call, and we talk about whatever needs to be talked about. For example, I don't think my home is worth $800,000. I'll say, okay, but your neighbor is exactly the same home sold for $825 in June. Oh, I wasn't aware of that. I didn't see the listing. Well, it might not have been listed. It might have been a private sale, which still doesn't. It's still a market transaction, so it's still a valid sale. So conversations kind of go like that. We really didn't know this year before the notices were mailed what kind of calls or volume there was going to be with regards to questions about the assessment. I held an open house in town on the 9th, and I was fully prepared to stay until the 10th in the event that there were, lineups out the hall, out the door for people to speak with me. And we had 3 people come. So, I mean, that's good. It's good from my perspective in that there aren't any, upset folks out there with regards to what their assessed values are. And if they are, I certainly invite them to call. I believe our complaint deadline is tomorrow. So, you never know. It's funny on the non-residential perspective, most property owners are represented by tax agents. For some reason, they are notorious for leaving it till 4:00 on the day that the complaint period closes. So we'll see how that goes tomorrow. But overall, I don't think we're going to have a heavy complaint season this year. Just moving forward, this is just a rough guide of the area of the municipality that we concentrate on. That does not mean that if you fall outside of that area in any given year that we don't still do an assessment. Every property is assessed every single year. But these are in the year of the area on the map is the properties that I'll go out. I'll be out in front of the door. I'm like, okay, what do I have assessed? What's here? Is there anything that is recognizably different? If there is, I'll further my investigation, either knock on the door, talk to the property owner, or leave a callback card if there's a reason for me to gather any more information. Or it appears to be exactly the same as what I have assessed. I move on and I don't bother anybody. So that's the map there. And then, as I spoke, we had an open house on the 9th. Today's council presentation. I address any assessment complaints that come in. And as always, we monitor the real estate market from a year-over-year basis and apply that accordingly. Any questions? I know that's a lot of information thrown at you in a short amount of time, so.
Thank you, Mr. Birtles, and I take it back. Not mundane at all. Riveting. Absolutely riveting.
Okay. I don't know if I'd say riveting.
Councillors, questions? Councillor Roger?
Thank you, Mayor Arlen, through to Mr. Birtles. I was just wondering, you've got 25 properties that are under 200,000. I'm just not aware of any in town that are under 200,000. What are those?
On the residential? Oh, stop me if I get to the right one. This one? Under two. So this is distribution of residential assessed. So there's another example I gave you earlier on the approved home accommodations. So that would be a small amount of commercial. There are many properties in town that are commercial, essentially, that have a manager's suite or something, security suite that's assessed residentially. So the total assessment might be 10 million, but there might be just a small purpose.
So just a portion of a property.
Yeah, yeah.
The second question I had was, we've discussed over the years the co-op in town, the Southview Co-op. The assessment, of course, is lower because the price is restricted, but the property is equivalent to a property that's worth much more in town. And can assessments be based on anything but resale price? Can it be based on the property itself and the value to the owner?
That's a deep question. But yes. So the Municipal Government Act says market value. So what is market value of a co-op? Is it what it might sell for if it's not restricted due to the co-op nature? Or is it market, or what it might sell for because it is restricted? We're taking the perspective that it is restricted, so market value of that co-op is limited to what they could sell for. You could go through the legislation, find some gray places that say it's assessed based on the fee simple estate, which means there are no encumbrances. So co-op development here, non-co-op development here, these are selling for $700,000-800,000. These should be assessed at $700,000-800,000. We could try that, but I would suspect that we might have 40 or 50 assessment complaints arguing that market value isn't 700, it's only what I could sell it for. So could we? We could. Should we? I'm not prepared to, unless we decide that that's something that should be entertained.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions for Mr. Birtles? Councillor Melnick?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Birtles. Welcome back. Glad to have you here and glad to have your experience. And of course, you're dealing with something that you don't deal with in a lot of the other communities that you're doing assessments. And my question would evolve around, last year there was an assessment, a lot of vacant land, no buildings.
Yep.
Property is assessed. Can you explain, for the benefit of council and also those watching, how assessments are going to be done in the rebuilding process? At some point, you're going to be looking at a building that's 20% or 60% or 70% complete. The land is what it is, but for the benefit of residents, what could they expect in the future?
Excellent question. So the assessed value, before I touch on the rebuild side of it, is this. We calculate the assessment of the land based on vacant land sales. Before the wildfire, we didn't have a ton of vacant land sales. Now we have a significant amount. And then improved assessments are based on sales of improved properties. Okay, so once we know what that number is, what the both numbers are, we can take the land value out of the total improved value, and the difference is what's left to the buildings. And I mention that because in Jasper, that difference on the buildings is a lot. I mean, the land value is a lot, but the building value is a lot. And to put that into perspective, if we move Jasper to a small northern Alberta oil town, the number in that town is nowhere near what it is in Jasper. And that's just simply because of the market. Okay, so then now we're in 2026, and let's say in 2025, you started building your home. But it wasn't complete as of December 31st. The Municipal Government Act says that the physical condition date is December 31st. So we need to recognize what was on the property at that time. So how do we do that? We assess it based on the specs of it as if it were an improved property. And then when we recognize that it doesn't have heating, doesn't have plumbing, doesn't have interior finish, doesn't have doors and windows or whatever the case is, and we pull that part out of it. So instead of an $800,000 improvement assessment, it might be $300,000, let's say. In that Northern Alberta town, the total assessment might be 300, right? But in Jasper, so that's the progressive amount we call it. So now we're into 2026. May 1st, they're allowed, their home is complete. They move into the property. So in the fall, they are going to get a supplementary assessment for that $500,000 that was pulled out because it wasn't complete at the end of the year. And they'll be taxed on that from May 1st to December 31st. Okay, so there'll be 8 months in there that they'll pay a prorated amount on that 500,000. And then next year, there will not be another supplementary. It'll simply be the total land plus buildings. And obviously that level of completeness varies from property to property. Some might, be just about done. So in that case, we probably won't even issue a supplementary assessment, and then next year it'll be a full amount. Does that answer?
It does, but and I also want to raise building in Jasper, a property that may have been $700,000 might cost $900,000 to build, but the way the property value is assessed is not the rebuild cost. It's based on sales of similar properties. So while somebody might have an insurance claim that, allows them to build, it costs that much to build, their property taxes will be based on the market value if that home was to sell. And that's basically how taxes are going to be. I'm worried that in the future, people are going to say, well, I've been assessed on this, $900,000 or $1 million home, but it's really only worth $800,000.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, I would predict that there's going to be a period of uncertainty, maybe you could say. Once the rebuilds start to resell, at that point, we're going to know, is that original construction amount plus land similar to the total value, or is it something different? But without those resell sales, it's going to be tough. And then everything else is going to be based on, existing properties that are selling.
Thank you for that. And I appreciate the clarity that you're going to bring to this. And I'm sure you're going to bring next year as well as we continue the process.
Yeah, for sure.
Deputy Mayor Frechette.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. And through you, I would ask Mr. Birtles, obviously we're going to be in a state of flux for probably a number of years. Just to deal with the assessed values, how many snapshots do you have to have? How many sales in every, whether it's non-residential or residential, how many sales will dictate where that sector of real estate will fall? Is it 1? Is it 50? Is it, how many is it? What do you get your statistics from? How many properties have to change hands?
There really isn't a number, a minimum or a maximum. We just have to deal with what we get. I mentioned earlier, it's not just listed properties, it's anything that transfers. So I could put a for sale sign on my front yard and sell it, and somebody could, buy it, and that's a true market transaction. Or I could sell it to my son at a discounted value. We need to be able to understand that that's not a true market transaction, and we don't include it in our analysis. But to get to your question, the vacant land or the land assessments up until the wildfire, we haven't had a vacant land sale in 3-4 years, right? We've had sales of property and then the teardowns and rebuilt, but there's a different kind of value there. So, but we still have a value on the land, even though we don't have any sales. Not saying that's a perfect world by no means. On an improved perspective, let's say there's a development, one of the condo developments, not a co-op, and we have assessments from the previous year based on sales in the previous year, and then this year there's no sales in there, and that happens from time to time. But the rest of the municipality increases by, let's say, 4% because of market transactions. Well, we're going to increase this one by 4% as well, even though we don't have any market data to tell us that's right. But there's no reason to think that just because there isn't a sale there, that it didn't change similar to the rest of the municipality. So there's never a spot or a time where we say, oh, there's no sales, we just have to leave it. We can't do that because that's really not what market value does. We have to use our expertise. What happened in the rest of the municipality? Was it consistent across the rest of the municipality? If so, it's got to be consistent here. So in times of low sale counts, it becomes difficult, certainly, which this current assessment is some of the lowest sales that we've had, simply because all through last summer, there really wasn't, or sorry, all through the summer 2024 there and the fall, there really wasn't any sales. So I'm not sure if I'm really answering your question.
No, you certainly did. I was just curious about the number of transactions, because we do have sectors of our community that there rarely is a sale, whether it's a business or a Lake Edith property.
I was just going to mention Lake Edith.
We don't see them sell. Rarely do you see them sell. So I was just curious about how you would determine what that market is, what the value of it is, and determine the tax base for it going forward. I think certainly on the residential side, we're going to see just bizarre justifications between all of them.
Yeah,
because they're going to sell. People are building to resell. People are upping their densities. There's going to be all kinds of, the barometer is going to move all over the place. So you'll have a lot of data there probably, but there are properties that we never see sell. So I was just curious how that was determined.
It becomes difficult for sure. Like in Lake Edith, 50 properties. If there's one sale a year, that's impressive. Sometimes there's two. Sometimes we'll go 2 or 3 years without any sales, but it doesn't mean the value goes down if there's no sales.
Yeah, absolutely. I had not seen them go down. I've been here 50 years. I haven't seen, I don't think I've seen more than 4 or 5 sell in all the times I've been here, at least listed. I'm sure they sell internally, but
way more sell internally or privately.
Yeah, I would suggest that's the case. Thank you for that, Mr. Birtles. Appreciate it.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland, and thank you for your presentation. I have a question about the R4 district, which is my neighborhood, and my family is back in a new modular home. I'm hearing concern from residents who are still in their old mobiles or trailers that in order to get a mortgage, you need a piece in your insurance policy that you can't get with an old trailer. And clearly nobody has come forward and disputed their assessment. But have you seen that? Like I feel a lot of residents in that area that still have their older mobiles think that they're kind of unsellable because you can't get that piece in your insurance policy.
That's a great example, and it's a bit of an extreme one, and I'll elaborate on that. So earlier I spoke to, we calculate the value of the land based on vacant sales, calculate the improved values based on improved sales, and the difference is the value that's to the buildings. Those older trailers have assessments of $100,000. Would anyone ever give that property owner $100,000 to take it and move it over there? Absolutely not. But that's not how it's assessed. It's assessed based on what willing buyers are willing to pay, and whether or not they are able to get insurance or a mortgage or whatever is sadly irrelevant because they were willing to pay that. So on the property as it is. In other words, a question on the assessment isn't, do you have insurance and do you have a mortgage? It doesn't matter because the one 2 doors down just sold for $425,000. Right. And it's an old, depreciated manufactured home, just like many of the other ones are. So although I understand that that's a concern for some people and not everyone can just pay $425,000 without a mortgage. But the reality is that's what they're trading for. In other words, if they wanted to sell their property, would they only sell it for land value, knowing that they could sell it for land value plus 100,000? Of course not. I fully understand and appreciate the concern, but the reality is it's not based on insurance value or whether they can get a mortgage or not.
If I can follow up, so I think you'll see a decline in older mobiles, like not new ones selling, because you'd have to have cash to purchase one because you couldn't get a mortgage for them. I'm curious if we've had any sales of older trailers since the fire, and I don't think we have.
I'd have to look. I'm not 100% sure, but when you say you'd mentioned that what was your last statement? You had a point there. Right?
I forget.
Okay.
In order to get a mortgage, you need guaranteed replacement cost in your insurance policy, and you cannot get that on a mobile or trailer. So if a buyer wants to buy an older trailer or mobile, they have to have the cash up front because you can't get a mortgage for it without this piece in your insurance policy. New ones, and Councillor Frichette's in the same situation, new ones are insurable because they are considered manufactured homes or modular homes, but older trailers or mobiles are not. So and this is the concern I hear from my neighbors that didn't lose their homes, their trailers in the fire, that they won't be able to sell them because a person would have to have that. You know, I haven't seen a trailer sell for $425. That's pretty low. Someone would have to have $600,000 cash up front, and I don't know anybody that has $600,000 cash up front that's going to buy an old trailer. So there is this concern in the R4 of the remaining trailers that there's a concern there.
They're certainly not going to spend $600,000 with the plan that next year they're going to rebuild, because then they just essentially paid $600,000 for the lot. So again, that's going to be a scenario where sales will tell us where to go. And if I know what I was going to ask you, is the mortgage requirement something that's new, or insurance requirement something that's new after the fire?
I don't think so, but I think a lot of the older trailers, either it was banks allowed it without having it. I know on our situation, we didn't have guaranteed replacement, but still got a mortgage, and going through this process, the bank was surprised they gave us a mortgage. But I think that it's all been flagged now. I feel like this is going to be a challenge for residents when their mortgages come up for renewal or when they're wanting to sell their older mobiles.
Well, it's something I'll be cognizant of when I do the market. Yeah.
Councillor Conscript.
So just to confirm what I believe you said, Troy, and what a question Councillor Malik was asking, and I've heard some concern in the town. So if somebody's building a house, and let's say lots are about $400,000 to $500,000, and the build is going to be $2 million. They got $2.5 million into it, but that's not what it's going to be assessed on. And I'm not a speculator, but if one house sold next year for $2.5 million, then you're saying all the houses around it are, not more than one does, but I think we're going to come into some strange times, and the market is going to work itself out. But
first of all, we haven't had a sale in excluding Lake Edith on a residential property for $2 million in Jasper yet. If we do, I would suspect it would be on a new build. But if it's only one and there are no other sales, it would be pretty difficult for me to say, no, that's the top. But if there's 5, if there's 10, back to your question, now that is the market for the top end. In other words, if there's 10 sales of north of $2 million on new builds, guess what? Sadly, that's what the values are going to be. Yep.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Now I can relay that to people, and it's, I guess, asking the council as well. Somebody's living in a $700,000 house, and to no fault of their own, they're building like high building costs house, 1.3 million, and the lot is up to 1.5 million now. They're like totally comfortable in their $700,000 house. Now it gets assessed at $1.5 million. I mean, if we have to tell them that's what you're paying taxes on, then that's what we have to. But I figured I could ask you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the legislation doesn't allow us to say, doesn't allow us to say anything but market value. Market value is the valuation standard. So you lost your home. It was worth 700 before. Now it's worth 1.4, let's say, if that's the number. Because that's what market value is. That's what the assessment will be based on.
Thank you.
In the absence of other questions, I have a couple for you, Mr. Birtles. And I appreciate that you brought to our attention that the increase in exempt assessment is primarily due to interim housing.
Yeah.
I'm thankful for that explanation because I was struggling to figure out what that is. So that makes sense. That's addition. But otherwise, as between 24 and 25, and those are both then as of December 31st of those respective years with supplemental assessments. Is that right?
Yeah, the supplementary assessment roll is not included in this, but if a property was partially complete as of the end of the year, it is included in this. Okay, so supplementary is separate. But however all the properties sat as of December 31st, this includes it.
Okay. I struggle, and potentially some other residents will struggle to understand how residential assessments since the fire have gone up by $86 million and non-residential assessments by $36 million. When we look at the hundreds of properties that were destroyed, 2 hotels in town destroyed, other outlying commercial accommodations, either some wholly destroyed, some partially. I would have expected to see a diminishment in overall assessment due to those losses.
I can give you a very clear answer.
Okay, thank you.
All of those diminishments were recognized last year. Which one? Yeah. See the dip in the 2024 assessment? That's because all of those assessments were taken off the roll.
All right, so 2024 relative to 2023. So the pre-fire was all captured in 2023. 2024 reflects the loss of properties.
Yep.
And 2025 now going back to
is still all of those properties were lost, plus we have some new construction, right? So there's a little bit, if I go to the growth one here. So for example, just in the residential town site, we have 25 million in new construction on the residential. That's the year after the fire was recognized on the assessment base. Right? It took us a while to get going, to get the rebuild started. So this one here shows you that last year's numbers are way lower than the year before. And that is because of the loss, the physical loss.
All right. Thank you for that. If you go up a couple of slides to the one that shows residential, non-residential, exempt, all in one bar graph. There you go. Do you recall, and you've been at this for a long time, do you recall when the province shifted your assessment requirement to income-based assessment for non-residential?
1995 was when the municipal government came into play, and that's the market value standard. Was that as of around then, 1995? But The income approach has been more commonly employed since about this chart. We've been using the income approach for many years. Some assessors still don't use it, but that's just because they don't know how. Frankly.
Is it fair then to say that this graph is consistent with respect to the assessment method for residential as compared to non-residential? Like from 2004 onward, you would have been assessing non-residential properties on the income-based approach?
Yep. Yeah. And you can see the spread here between the residential and the non-res. Back in 2004, they were almost the same. Your assessment base was almost the same. Now you have quite a significant spread. So that's what I'm talking for. You have different levers. You can pull the residential tax rate and the non-residential tax rate at different amounts to help mitigate that tax burden from the different classes. And I just want to touch, and I think you're trying to get here, but I'm not sure. The income approach contemplates the income that the property makes, but the end goal is still market value. So for example, if we have all the hotels we have in town and they're all making a whole bunch of money and we have a bunch of sales, we can calculate a cap rate very easily. If that cap rate changes, then it's not just the net operating income that affects the assessment. So if you recall through COVID, hotel revenues were negative in many cases. Does that mean it's a negative property value? Absolutely not. So we have to play with that cap rate in that scenario to still come up with the market value assessment. That's still the target at the end of the day, is market value.
And when you say net operating income, my understanding is that that is also normalized in some sense. So you don't just take
That's right.
what the business says. So if they're taking huge payments to
100%,
their own directors, that doesn't count.
That's right. Yeah. For hotels specifically, we use a 3-year weighted that helps take the peaks and valleys out of it. So there are a number of expenses that are often reported that are not allowable expenses when used for the income approach. And it doesn't mean not allowed in a negative connotation. It just isn't a variable used. For example, amortization, interest costs. If I buy a $10 million hotel and I finance every dime of it, I'm going to have huge interest costs. If another guy buys the same $10 million hotel with cash, he has zero interest costs. The property's still worth $10 million. So we strip out all of those unallowable expenses. We do allow for some normalized expenses like replacement reserves for replacements and management fees and things like that. But that's applied consistently across the board.
Thank you. And my last set of questions just relates to assessment of exempt properties. So you're required to assess exempt properties, and that has some benefit to us, particularly for other orders of government who might be inclined to pay payments in lieu of taxes. At least we have something to start with. Is there any other use by others of assessment for exempt properties? I mean, it's just interesting that you're required to do that in all cases, and I'm wondering whether anybody else makes use of that.
In every municipality that we assess all property based on the Municipal Government Act. So it lists assessable property, and then it lists unassessable property. Unassessable property are things like roads and curbs and gutters and water mains and things like that. Just never are assessed. But in every instance, a school is assessed, a church is assessed, this building, every municipality, there would be assessment. And really there's no need. And often the exempt assessments get a little bit neglected because there's really no scrutiny on them. There's no tax requirement. There's no audit on it. And then once in a blue moon, it'll sell. Like sometimes a church right? Like sometimes, and then, we have to dive in and figure out, is it a market transaction, or was it something unrelated, or whatever the case is. But to answer your question, it is a thing that we have to do that is really, there's no benefit for.
Thank you. I think I haven't formulated this question very well, but Councillor Roger asked you earlier about properties that are subject to restrictions on sale amount. Would it be possible to value or assess that portion of the value that is exempt on those properties, just so we knew? That is, they are, in a general sense, I mean, you have to assess them, I think, now based on the maximum sale price. But compared to another similar property that is not sale restricted, they might be seen as more valuable.
Well, they certainly would be.
Right. And so there is a difference in value. Could that be identified as an exempt value?
Well, technically it can be done, but legislatively, there isn't a spot that we can follow through the act that says we can do it and classify it as an exempt property. They're not an exempt entity, right? I mean, for purposes outside of the assessment and tax notice, I'm sure we could do it for information, but to show it as an exempt amount on your assessment notice, we couldn't legislatively do that.
Okay, fair enough. I appreciate that. And as I say, I've just got thoughts rolling through my head. All right, if there are no further questions from council, I expect that we would be anticipating a motion to accept the report for information. Deputy Mayor Burchett, you're making that motion? All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Brittles, for that report. And thank you for your willingness to be available, both to council and to residents. That was very much appreciated. Thank you. That leaves us still on delegations, agenda item 4. As I indicated earlier, this is the point on our agenda where people in the gallery can speak to any matter on today's agenda for 3 minutes, subject to questions from councillors. And again, I will invite anybody who wants to come forward and speak to any item to identify yourself by name and the organization you represent, and just give an indication of what item on the agenda you wish to speak to, so that the conflicted councillor will know to excuse himself.
I can see what it is, so I'll excuse myself.
I'm Stefa Andrew, and I'm speaking on agenda item 6.2. We're here today as a family that's been part of this community for over a century. For 100 years, our business hasn't just operated in Jasper, it has grown alongside it, contributed to it, and relied on the relationships we've built here. We are a piece of this town's history and identity. Like many others, we've faced a sequence of very difficult years. These circumstances, beyond all of our control, have put us in a position we never expected to be in. But these hardships should not erase our legacy or undermine our efforts to overcome them. We are still here, we are still committed, and we still have more to give. We are asking for the opportunity to recover our debts and to continue contributing to the community that we've always called home. I want to stress, we are not denying our responsibilities. We are just asking for a path forward that allows us to meet them. If the motion proceeds to auction off the Astoria Hotel, it will resolve our tax issue, but in doing so, it will end a 100-year-old family business. I am asking you to consider what is lost in that outcome, not only for our family, but for the entire community that I feel values local ownership and the continuity and shared history that comes with that. We are part of this community, we want to remain a part of it, and we are just asking for leniency. Thank you.
Thank you for that. You might want to wait a moment. I was going to invite questions from councillors if there are any. All right,
Okay.
made you get up and down,
No worries.
up and down. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor Ireland, council members, and administration. Thank you all for taking the time to meet with myself, George, and Stefa regarding agenda item 6.2. Yesterday, I sent out letters from our relationship manager at ATB and our accounting team from MNP confirming that we are currently in the process of securing financing for our business. This process is well underway, and I'm happy to speak to those letters if needed. I want to clearly acknowledge we are behind on our municipal taxes. We take full responsibility for that. We are here today with one goal: to explain our situation and arrive at a fair resolution. At the same time, I want to emphasize that we have been paying our taxes. Today, the total outstanding balance is $720,756. Of that, $345,294 is principal, with the remainder being penalties and compound interest. Since 2020, our business has paid over $420,000 toward our municipal tax account. To be clear, the payments we have made are more than the principal amount owing. Additionally, since 2020, we have consistently paid our utilities to the amount of $313,000 as of today. So if this full amount is ultimately collected, our small family-run business will have paid over $1.4 million to the municipality since 2020. The reason I highlight this is not to avoid responsibility, but to show that we have been consistently contributing. To reiterate, we are paying our taxes. The challenge is the structure of the penalties. Under the current municipal bylaw, the 18% annual penalty is applied to areas that include prior penalties. As a result, the balance grows faster than we can realistically pay it down. That's the core issue, and that's the ultimate reason why we are in the situation we're in now. I want to address something I know is top of mind for council: fairness and setting precedent. We understand the hesitation that if relief is provided to one business, others may expect the same. What I would suggest is not an exception, but a distinction. Not all businesses experienced the same conditions over the past several years. While our hotel and restaurant were being mandated to close, specifically our bar, the Dead Dog, during the pandemic, liquor stores were being deemed essential services, although selling the same product. Returning from the wildfire, tourism in Jasper experienced a significant decrease, reducing the hospitality sector ability to make a profit, while at the same time, local construction companies were ramping up as rebuilding efforts began. These are examples of how equity has not always existed within the business community, and therefore the process for tax collection should not be assumed in the enforcement of taxes and penalties. Accordingly, I respectfully ask council to adopt the following course of action. First, I ask that council not direct administration to proceed further with the tax sale of our property. Second, I ask that council consider relief for hospitality businesses whose ability to generate revenue was directly interrupted by mandated closures, emergency events, and wildfire-related disruptions. What I can assure you is our family business will continue to communicate and work closely toward a sound resolution and uphold our standards to run a business which benefits this community. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. And I had invited you to just state your name for the record and the organization.
Oliver Andrew from the Astoria Hotel.
And thank you very much for that. And for the record, your sister was quite a bit more succinct, so I let you use some of her time.
Thank you.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Andrew. You mentioned two things. Referred to the tax sale and suspending that opportunity, but you referred to an item, a hospitality business relief. Can you explain what you mean by that? Because I think you use the term as opposed to exemption versus distinction, and I'd like to understand your thought process on the hospitality business relief.
Yeah. So by distinction, I'm referring to, and those examples speak to it where, and equity is often brought up, which is, of course, needs to be considered. However, I would say that our problems primarily started during COVID, mostly because we were being closed down, that there was no revenue source, and we were at the same time still required to pay taxes. Which puts us in a different category. And I'll use the example of the liquor store. So liquor stores are mandated also to be open as a essential service, selling the same product as a bar would. But you can see how they're on two totally different playing fields. So I do feel like during that time, the hospitality industry was not put into, I guess, a fair position to pay the same way a liquor store would. So that's why I ask for the distinction.
Thank you for that explanation.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. And thank you for coming today, Mr. Andrew. A couple questions for you. You mentioned you've been paying your taxes. Are you on a payment plan, or are you just making regular payments? And then what are your municipal taxes roughly per year, if you know?
That's a good question. I probably should know. We are not on a payment plan. The numbers I gave are between now and from 2020. That's the accumulated total of what we had paid.
Deputy Mayor Frechette.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, and through you to Oliver, Andrew, and to indeed the family here. First of all, a comment. Of course, indeed, the Andrew family have been in business here I've been here 50 years, and they were operating then. Your grandfather was still around. And I certainly don't see any of our longstanding business community struggle. We're certainly not here to impede or cause any extra burden. However, this is a significant concern, of course, going forward in terms of precedent. I think every individual in Jasper and business has had some issue to deal with. I would just like to wonder the question. There's a letter here regarding potential financing that you are putting in place right now. Can you enlighten us as to what time frame? I think there was looking at a couple of months still before this issue becomes quite significant. Is that indeed still in play? Do you anticipate financial relief going forward? And will the date of potential auction be an issue, or will it be academic by then?
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. I do feel like the current date of the auction is certainly an issue for us because what I'm learning from dealing with the bank and our accountants is that things just take time. People have things to do, and everyone that we're working with is aware of the urgency of the situation. Yet still, they have protocols and they have formalities that they need to follow. So. The restriction of having this tax sale exist and working towards that, the fact that we might not have our, let's say, ducks in a row on June 10th, and one email gets unanswered, and then it leads to a full tax sale on June 11th. That is a reality as it stands now. So we, of course, like much more time.
So having said that, Mr. Adams, so is there reason to believe that the June 10th date would not be significant time? And if so, what would be your thoughts? I realize there's other issues that you had recommended that may be more fair, if you will. But those notwithstanding, is there any time frame that would be beyond the June date that you would have in mind, or is this something that is still an abstract in not only yourself but your family's business operation requests?
Well, I certainly, I wouldn't want to say a specific date, because then we're working towards that, and things are still up in the air. I mean, I think an engagement letter from the accountants, which is the MNP letter I added, is essentially saying that they are working towards reviewed statements. And last time I spoke with our accountant, they're right in the middle of tax season, so that's the priority for them right now, finishing up businesses' taxes, and then they can move on to us. So last I heard from the accountants is that a reviewed statement could be ready by end of June. And then, of course, we pass that along to ATB, and they do what they need to do. They haven't been able to give me a timeline on what that would take, but that's step one of the process. So like I said, things do take time. That's why my hope is that the tax sale just gets, there's a non-motion for that, and buys us more time.
Okay, thank you for that. So if I understand it correctly, the sequence of events that would be beneficial to rectify this issue, or at least get some sort of resolution, so we don't come to the most significant possible result. And I'm sure that none of us feel that we want to go through that kind of thing. So if I get this right, you're depending on your accountants to review business statements to forward it to ATB, who would be ultimately able to either give you the funds, or otherwise they won't go forward with it without it. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. From my understanding, banks need to look at reviewed financial statements before they can make a decision.
Okay, very good. Thank you for your answers, Oliver. Appreciate it.
Councillor Conscript.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. I feel it is important to say my piece. I'd like to keep personal relationships and emotions out of it, although there's lots. This started happening before my term, so I could only speak to what's happening now. Should everybody pay their taxes? Definitely yes. Is there fortuitous circumstances that can occur that may put people in situations that makes it difficult to pay them? Also yes. What those situations are to different people, perhaps we'll never know, but we have to be considerate of that. So here we are. The municipality needs unpaid taxes to be paid with adequate interest and on a reasonable timeline. And on that, I'd like to thank administration and CAO Givens for making this happen and bringing it to the forefront, because if you never got our taxes paid, I'd be a lot more worried. So these are my concerns. Two things. If we charge exorbitant interest rates, which I'm still trying to figure out, I've got the books, I've talked to accountants, I've talked to the CAO, and I'm still unsure, and I can't speak confidently to what's happening. It could be upwards 30-40% that we're charging. And are we making it viable for family businesses who've been through at least 3 COVID and 2 fires, major economic hardships possible to pay? If we do decide they have to pay these rates, I feel that we should at least give them till the end of summer, September 22nd, to do so, and giving them some time, work through the summer and get this settled once and for all. And thank you.
I don't see other questions. I would just like to make a couple of comments, particularly based on Councillor Conscrew's opening comments, that it's an impossible task to be detached, although that's part of our duty here. But I certainly appreciate the argument well expressed by Ms. Andrew in her first comments about the family legacy in the community. And it's absolutely not lost on me. And in fact, my grandfather worked for your great-grandfather once upon a time. So I understand the connection and the contribution over 100 years to this community, and that's appreciated. We also, of course, this side of the table, have to look at equity in terms of every taxpayer, not a one-off. And so I just wanted to indicate that this is challenging. My question, having said all that, is again brought up by a comment from Councillor Conscrew, because previous council did address this issue in part in September, so before the election. And at that time, we extended time for any taxpayer who was in arrears to sign up for pre-authorized payments. And I take it that in response to the question from Councillor Hall, that did not happen. You have not got onto a payment plan with the municipality since last September. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right, thank you for that. Any other questions arising from any of that? I guess not. Thank you very much, Mr. Andrew, for your submission.
Thank you.
Are there any other individuals in the gallery who wish to address council at this time as a delegation, either with respect to item 6.2 or any other item on our agenda? All right. Seeing no hands, I will declare that the delegation portion of our agenda is completed. I would ask, as is happening, Councillor Roger to be alerted that he may rejoin the meeting. And I think at this point, I will call a brief recess, and we will reconvene in 7 minutes. That will be 3:15 by my clock. Thank you. I will call us back to session. My apologies to those watching online. We are 2 minutes late. We are at agenda item 5. There is no correspondence to address on our agenda, and I take it, Mr. Given, nothing has come in since the agenda was published?
No, Mayor Ireland.
Thank you for that. That takes us to agenda item 6, new business, beginning with agenda item 6.1, a director's report from the Director of Protective and Legislative Services, Director Dedon.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm here to present my director's report, and I will keep it brief. Spring is a time where we spend a lot of our time working on emergency management. We've held a meeting of the Emergency Management Agency, which is the staff group, as well as the Emergency Advisory Committee, which is the mayor and 2 councillors. These are structures that are mandated under the Emergency Management Act, and the purpose is to coordinate and oversee the development of plans and initiatives that relate to emergency management. So those were the first 2 of the year, but there will be more. And our big focus has been on getting our internal incident management team ready. So that is all the staff across departments that are trained in emergency management and come to help us out when we have a large event. So obviously our protective services team is deeply engaged in that process, but we do get support from staff across departments. And excuse me, coming up at the end of this week, we have our annual exercise, which we usually do with Parks Canada, which is the case in 2026 again. So essentially where we work with a scenario and take the actions as we would during an emergency. And that allows us to test the plans and identify any gaps and solidify our working relationships. And also a part of that is the agency administrator session. So that is the day before we get together with the Emergency Advisory Committee, CAO Given, and senior leadership from the Parks Canada, Jasper National Park, and to make sure that we're also aligned at that level. So the decision making and the authority and the finances are all being discussed and understood at that level ahead of hazard season. We're also working, one of the highlights of our capital project plan is putting permanent sprinklers on critical infrastructure. So that was one of the highlights of our after action report. By doing that, we save some valuable time during an incident. So we're not deploying sprinklers at the time of the incident, but have that infrastructure already in place and we can just turn it on very easily. And we're making some progress on that. We're quite happy with how that's going. So currently we're looking at the water facilities, so the water wells, as well as the water treatment plant, the fire hall, and we're hoping to also do the wastewater treatment plant, which was a bit of a bonus. It's one of our biggest values at risk, probably the most expensive to replace if something did happen to it. So we're trying to squeeze that into the budget and see what we can do, working on some funding, but we're pretty confident that we can get that done before summer. So we're pretty happy with those outcomes. Other highlights include under communications and engagement. So we have our wildfire resiliency information session. So we renamed it from wildfire preparedness to wildfire resiliency. Seems to be a more accurate depiction of what we do there. And that is a usual session we hold at the multipurpose hall in the spring. So presentations from staff from the municipality of Jasper as well as Parks Canada. And this year we've asked Brendan McKinnon from FP Innovations. So he wrote the report that described how the fire went from structure to structure in the town of Jasper in 2024. And he is one of the leading scientists in wildfire behavior. And his work really informs how we protect communities going forward. So we think it's a huge asset to have Brendan presenting and hopefully get residents a bit more knowledge and information on how that all works and what they can do to be part of the solution. And Emergency Preparedness Week is coming up the week after, so the first week in May. And the two key events there will be an open house at the Emergency Services Building. That's on Wednesday, May 6th. And we have a lot of partners, including the Red Cross, Fire Smart Alberta, and other agencies that will be in attendance. So a great place to get information, and it's more casual drop-in compared to the resiliency information session. And there's also community-wide Fire Smart Day, which is happening this Saturday, May 9th. And so we're encouraging Jasperites and business owners to clean up their yards and remove any combustible materials from their properties. You can get some paper bags at the activity center, and there's a pickup by the operations department that goes around and collects all that stuff. So you can look at our website and social media for details on that. So we are in full swing with our spring activities is the key takeaway. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Dodon. Questions from Council, beginning with Deputy Mayor Frechette.
Thank you, Mayor Island, and through you to Director Dodon. I'm wondering about the Fire Smart Day, and my understanding is, of course, every property owner will be given the opportunity to clean up their yards, and two questions: will all that debris is picked up by the municipality crews?
Yes, Mayor Ireland to Deputy Mayor Frechette. That is correct. Our operations department is doing that work.
Okay, and I'm just wondering about the green spaces that are not, they're not private property. They're they're in and around different neighborhoods. Is that going to be included in the Fire Smart cleanup process?
The purpose or the incentive is to get property owners to clean up their own properties. So I guess in that sense, those green spaces are not the property of any specific individuals. Those are municipal properties for the most part, not always. So the municipality does work on a regular basis to fire smart our own properties. So that would be more of an internal initiative is my understanding. Or, you know, we've seen work bees in the past to address specific areas. So it's something that could be organized, but is not necessarily contemplated with the specific initiative that's taken place on May 9th.
Okay, so if a work bee as such were to be put together to mitigate some of the debris that's lying around and drag it out to the street and whatnot, it will be dealt with by our crews.
Deputy Mayor Frechette, I would suggest that maybe a bit more coordination might be required, but also I wonder specifically if you have any properties in mind, which maybe we could discuss offline. But like I'm thinking of municipal spaces and green spaces and parks, and I can't really think of any that have a ton of debris. But then if there is debris in a forested area, usually there's a reason for that. So I'd be happy to take that up with you maybe offline.
Okay, fair enough. That's what we'll do. Thank you, Director Nandel.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland, and thank you for your report. I have a few questions for you. Easy one to start. The residential sprinkler program. Can you please remind me how that works?
Mayor Ireland, through to Councillor Hall, we launched last year a residential sprinkler program, and in a nutshell, there's about 3 different kits available. And if you get one of our firefighters to come over and do a Fire Smart home assessment on your property, so to help you identify areas for improvement, you qualify to buy the kit at cost, essentially, which is about half the price of retail. So that program is still running in 2026, and you can contact our captain of prevention is responsible for that, and all the information's on our website. And we're also working on different initiatives to sort of expand on that program, but I'm not in a position to share any details at this stage.
Thank you for that. My second question, and I'm not sure if I'm kind of going into the operations department, but I'm hearing from residents concern around due to higher winds because of lack of trees and infrastructure, construction debris like flying around town and nails on streets and garbage. And I'm just curious if there's some extra enforcement coming or extra town cleanup for that.
Mayor Ireland, through to Councillor Hall, I can speak to that with my Director of Protective Services and the bylaw aspect of it. So part of our construction coordination initiatives that this has come up, and we've received concerns from residents, specifically in Cabin Creek. There seems to be a lot of stuff just flying from construction sites. And there's a couple avenues possible. Controlling the garbage and the debris that's generated on site. That is a building permit condition. So technically, that would fall under Parks Canada as an enforcement situation. If there was a specific site that had concerns, they would have the tools to deal with that through the building permits. But generally speaking, the municipality also has bylaws that say against illegal dumping, essentially. As with a lot of enforcement matters, it's catching people red-handed is the difficulty with enforcement. So it's more of a compliance initiative, and then consistent with other issues that we're seeing on different construction sites. A lot of times it's subcontractors that show up on site and don't necessarily follow the directives that the Prime might have given them. So it's a bit more difficult to chase that down, but the Prime has responsibility for the site, which ultimately has permits. So there's a way there. And I'm not aware of any sort of grassroots initiatives or, some kind of cleanup has come up as an idea, but I don't know that it has any traction yet.
Mayor Ireland, maybe I'll just add a little bit. I know that the JRCC team, and I guess maybe with the support of ops, we have a construction newsletter that goes out, like an industry bulletin that goes out to builders. And so I know that at least once we've highlighted the need for them to pay attention to their sites and debris and waste from their sites. So I think it's going to be an ongoing challenge. And I believe that this is something that the Communities in Bloom Committee has maybe discussed, and I know that they're working separately outside of obviously protective and legislative services on community cleanup. And so I think as we go through the next couple of years of construction waste is going to be an ongoing challenge for the whole community. The municipality has some tools, as Director Nadon highlighted. Some of that is cajoling and working with industry to respect the place that they're working in. We have some legislative tools, but I think it's going to be something that we're all going to have to work to try to improve over the next couple of years as we see more and more construction happening, certainly much more than we're used to.
Thank you for that. And if I may, my final question, and again, this may be diving into the ops department, but the new one-way around the outer loop of Cabin Creek, I'm curious if there's been feedback or resident comments about it.
Mayor Ireland, through to Councillor Hall. The one piece of feedback we formally considered at our last traffic advisory committee was someone just misunderstanding what the rules were. So it is a one-way in order to create 3 driving lanes instead of 4, like 2 driving and 2 parking. So that's now reduced to 3, which makes maneuvering a lot better. And the parking restriction is residents only on the outer loop, but then there is no restriction on the inner loop. We did consider making that contractor only, but then a lot of times those spots are sitting empty. There's no sense in doing that. And then any contractor that needs the space, there's a process for that. It's a street and use of public space permit if they need to set up bins or vehicles or a concrete pour or whatever the case may be. So, I mean, some incidental, like reports of someone driving down the wrong way or people just getting used to it, but generally I think it's working. We wanted to implement it now before the big peak of construction so people get used to it, and then we'll keep observing and patrolling to make sure that the restrictions are being followed.
I did hear some feedback in the last few weeks, and it's mostly positive. And I even had a resident suggest potentially keeping that as a permanent thing and implementing angle parking in Cabin Creek moving forward to maybe address the potential parking challenge we'll have as we rebuild and move into the next few stages.
Councillor Waxer.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, and through you to Director Nadon. I recall in previous years there's been some feedback or options for residents to host a Fire Smart neighborhoods Fire Smart kind of event, and I don't recall seeing it this year. I'm wondering if you're aware if Jasper has a number of Fire Smart neighborhood initiatives occurring this year.
Mayor Ireland, through to Councillor Waxer, that was a grant funding program through Fire Smart Alberta or Canada is where the money came from. So a neighborhood champion had to apply for the grant, and we did do a better job of communicating and promoting it in previous years. Our focus has not shifted entirely, but shifted to formalizing those neighborhood Fire Smart neighborhoods. So our captain of prevention has been working with specific neighborhoods that are formally registered with Fire Smart Alberta to be a certified neighborhood. And that includes Southview Co-ops, Stone Mountain, Patricia Place, Lake Edith, of course. And I believe there's a few others. So we've taken the approach of solidifying the ones that are formally recognized with Fire Smart Alberta. And then I think picking up on recruiting new neighborhoods essentially and making sure the neighborhood champions apply for the grant and coordinate a cleanup continues in the future. It just hasn't been as much of a focus this year. And as you would know, we were both involved in that project, and our neighborhoods, unfortunately, there's not much left to Fire Smart. So that was part of it as well.
My secondary question is that for someone like me, my property is very fire smarted at the moment, but I would certainly be interested in participating in a community event of some sort, and so I I just put that out there that there may be those of us whose property require no attention whatsoever, but might still be interested in participating in some way, shape, or form. So I'm wondering if there's potentially a way, or to consider ways that those of us could who are interested could participate.
Director Nadon, I'm interested in the community-wide Fire Smart Day. And so in response to Councillor Waxer, you mentioned Lake Edith as one that had taken advantage, I think, of the program that was in existence. Do we consider that the Lake Edith subdivision is part of the community for this purpose, and have arrangements been made to pick up waste out there?
Mayor Ireland, no, we have not. And you'll see earlier in my report that contract negotiations are ongoing. So that relates to, so what is the status of Lake Edith in relation to the Jasper Fire Department and our responsibility in providing services in that area? And structure protection is the wording in the agreement for the establishment of local government. So there's a structure fire, we respond with a fire truck. Fire Smart falls more under prevention. So technically would fall under the Jasper National Park jurisdiction. Previously, there's been concerted efforts between the municipality and the national park. And when it was one of the only neighborhoods that did that sort of initiative, there was more focus on it. But where does fire prevention fall in that extended municipal boundary in relation to the agreement for the establishment of local government and our emergency services agreement with Parks Canada is a question that we're in the middle of discussing with our counterparts at Parks. What kind of service level do they want? What fee structure goes around it? What do property taxes that are being collected by the municipality pay for? It's an issue that has not much background in place. It has never really been discussed in that sort of level of detail. But I would say there's a collaborative intention from both agencies to improve the service or include it, just be clear about whose responsibility it is and how to pay for it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I certainly encourage ongoing collaboration. And we do provide structural protection to Lake Edith properties. And the chances of having to provide that are probably diminished if they fire smart their communities. They should be encouraged to do that, and somebody should be assisting, and maybe it should be Parks Canada, but I just leave those negotiations in your capable hands, but not to forget that they are taxpayers, although a limited portion pays for different services. But it seems to be that the end result could be a limited draw on our resources. So it's worth considering. I see you, Councillor Melnick, if you would just give me one moment. I had one additional question and then I will be done. And that is with respect to the challenges that you are facing in recruiting peace officers. Fully understandable for a number of reasons. You indicate that you were going to repost. Was there no response or just not qualified people responding? And if that continues to be the case, what sort of operational impacts is that likely to have, particularly from a public-facing perspective as we move into summer?
Mayor Ireland, yeah, we had it posted. We interviewed a few candidates, and we decided not to hire from that pool of applicants and reposted. It's posted currently, and we've been actively trying to network and go beyond the usual posting mechanisms in order to find a suitable candidate. so peace officers are authorized to enforce provincial legislation. So anything that would fall under the Traffic Safety Act, the provincial one, so namely moving traffic violations, is a improvement in our service level that we had council approve and are hoping to support in the community, which means we only currently have one peace officer working for the municipality of Jasper. So they're the only person who could conduct moving traffic enforcement. So the launch of our service and program is limited because we don't have that additional individual. We had a few qualified individuals apply. We didn't really see any experienced officers apply. And we think the wage is competitive. We have worked with HR and we've reviewed what other communities are providing. It's just attracting someone to Jasper in lots of different areas is a challenge, and particularly for those highly trained positions is pretty standard. So we're hoping we can be successful. But having that said, we've functioned with one peace officers for at least 6 months. So it's not ideal heading into summer season, specifically for moving traffic enforcement. That means we have to rely on the RCMP a bit more to spend time in the community patrolling and enforcing speed limits and stop signs and things like that. But otherwise, in terms of our paid parking program and other initiatives downtown, it's that continues to be possible. And also from the construction coordination standpoint, we can also do that with bylaw officers as well.
Thank you for that. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Director Nadon. I'd like to pick up on Councillor Hall's question about the sprinkler systems. That program, we have a Fire Smart community specifically in Lake Edith. Are they able to participate in that program and receive and purchase discounted sprinklers? And I think that would reinforce the importance of the Fire Smart initiatives and could assist us should something happen down the road if they are able to be afforded that opportunity. And by all means, feel free to come back to council because there may need to be some additional discussions that need to occur.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. I think I would like the actual information from my team on that one and whether anyone from Lake Edith has actually applied or not. I think in terms of provision of the sprinklers at the discounted cost, there's no cost to the municipality on that. So we usually extend any sort of privileges we can when it's possible. The challenge becomes the time for our firefighters to go out there and do some home assessments. Whether that falls within the scope of the municipality or not is the question. So I'd be happy to get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Director Nadon? Seeing none, I thank you for your report, and I would look for a motion to receive the report for information. Councillor Waxer, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 6.2, 2025 tax recovery auction. Councillor Roger, I'm assuming that you will declare a conflict of interest. This matter was before council 2 weeks ago, at least 2 weeks ago, and then possibly prior to that as well. I've lost track, but I know that 2 weeks ago it couldn't be addressed because of lack of quorum, although council did hear some submissions with respect to the question because people were present in the quorum room, but there was no quorum. It is back before us now. Mr. Given, did you wish to give a brief recap of the request for decision that is not on today's agenda, but was on the previous agenda?
Sure, Mayor Ireland, I can give a bit of a brief overview. Under the Alberta Municipal Government Act, which I'll refer to as the MGA, municipalities have a process that's available to them when there are tax arrears over a significant number of years. This process is exercised in municipalities all across the province. This is the first time that the municipality is considering this process in Jasper. And so while it is a common practice in other places, that is sort of an annual process, this is the first time and obviously a significant impact for Jasper. Under the process, the property owner needs to receive notification from the municipality in advance. Administration can confirm that the property in question received notification letters from the Director of Finance and Administration in December of 2023, again, December of 2024, and December of 2025. So proper notification was given by the municipality over the course of the last number of years. The next steps that the Municipal Government Act sets out is for the municipality to establish the date, time, and location for a potential sale of the property. And the councils must add properties to a tax sale list. So there's those two different steps, which are not quite the same thing, but essentially establishing the date of a sale and establishing which properties need to go on the sale. And the only properties that can be added to a sale list are those which have received the notifications like I referenced before. Should council choose to set a tax sale date, there are still options available for the property and to come current with its amounts owing, and the sale would not go forward. And I'd say that in my experience, that's the most regular course of action. My understanding is that in most cases where there is a financial institution that holds a position on a property, a mortgage, once a tax sale date has been set, once we've crossed that threshold, council makes that motion, the mortgage holder has the authority to add those amounts owing to the mortgage, essentially to pay the mortgage, to pay the amounts outstanding, the property taxes that are outstanding and penalties, and then add them to the mortgage. And then it's a matter between the financial institution and the property owner to sort out what that means. If that happens, and when that happens, the property tax sale is canceled and does not proceed. So I just want to be clear that any action from council today does not preclude either the owner of the property or any other party that has a financial interest in the property from clearing up the amounts that are owed. And when and if that happens, the tax sale is canceled. So just to be clear to the public, to the property owner, and council about what the effect of any action of council today is. The setting of a date does not equal the sale of a property, and there are still options available for the property or anyone who has a financial or legal interest in the property to make those payments. And if that happens, then the tax sale is canceled. Mayor Ireland, I'm happy to answer any other specific questions you might have. Again, I appreciate that this is a difficult issue for council. Given the importance of the property, the local connections. And I would like to reflect that while this is the first time that this has happened in Jasper, the Municipal Government Act does allow for this, and municipalities across the province deal with this on an annual basis, sometimes in greater numbers and sometimes in lesser numbers, but this is a regular occurrence in most other municipalities across the province. Happy to answer any questions you might have, Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, CAO Given. Are there questions of administration from councillors? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to CEO Given. A date and time was suggested. Have we established that date and time as yet, or is that suggested that in the motion? I think I see suggested is that we would actually be setting that today.
So only council can set the date and time, and only council can do that at a regular meeting. So no, the date and time has not yet been set. That's the recommendation from committee that's come here to council today.
If I might continue, thank you. Councillor Conscude suggested a date of September 22nd, and I'm wondering, it sounds like you were suggesting an extension to that time during the delegation portion. Can you perhaps enlighten me as to the selection of that date?
Maybe not fully. It's I figured an extra 3 months, give them the summer, don't go too far into the fall. 3 months from June 11th would be September 11th, which I didn't think is the best date. And then I thought, well, the end of summer is a good date, but more importantly, no, I can't even add that. Yeah, so September 22nd, last day of summer, significant. Gives them some time to get all their ducks in a row. And yeah, it's from what I understand, and I want everybody to know that I feel compassionate to all the townspeople, and I think that everybody needs a helping hand. Sooner or later, I mean, we do have the tool. We are getting our money. That's not the question. It's just a matter of when and making it. Yeah, I won't be so compassionate next time. And as of September 22nd, you know, it's just what I seen. You guys seen some other stuff, but that's a date I'm thinking.
Councillor Melder?
If I might continue, and then I'm sure there'll be other commentary. We were provided with a couple of letters, one from a financial institution and one from the accounting firm that are working with George Andrews and Son, the Astoria Hotel. And in spirit of what Councillor Consrud is suggesting, I'm going to suggest that, we have 100 days of summer. It's a golden 100 days, and the sale of the property or potential sale on the date that's been suggested basically is right before the 100 days of the best revenue. In those 100 days, most businesses in this community generate 50% of their annual revenue that are open year round. And so, if we have the ability to change that date to have an opportunity for a business to be able to earn additional income, I think it is probably in our best interest. The other commentary I want to make is that if it was to go up for sale, it would be going up for sale as a going concern, which is an accounting term. It's a viable business. It's a going concern. Whoever would accept or buy that property would have to take it over at the beginning of summer with no real plan maybe of how they would operate the property, how they would staff the property, what the implications could be, the tourism impact if they're not prepared to walk in after the sale. I personally was involved in 1994 when the Marmot Lodge was sold by F.J. McDaniel, and it was sold to Mountain Park Lodges. That process took 9 months. And yes, the transfer of the property took place on the 1st of July. All of the employees were guaranteed their positions. There were lots of work and details that had to occur. I don't know if we would be responsible. Well, I don't know if we're acting responsibly if we were to set the date as June 11th for a property to change hands to an unknown entity. So I would be in favor of the suggestion of, moving the date to perhaps 120 days into October. So there's that golden 100 days of the summer for the property to generate revenue. And I look forward to other councillors' comments.
Councillor Waxer?
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. And I too would feel comfortable with that date, but my only concern is the compounding interest that would accrue in that 3-month period.
Deputy Mayor Frechette.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, and through you to I guess to the Andrew family. I agree really that. Sorry. Fair enough. I wasn't asking for comment. Just to make that clear, this is just a comment on from myself personally. I do agree with both Councillor Melnick and Councillor Consrew that we wouldn't be doing a service to the community generally. I don't think. I think we want to see this resolved in a positive light for your business interests. The history and everything notwithstanding, this is a tough situation that has evolved over a number of years that are understandable in many ways. Having said that, I think that we do have to get some closure on this, and I think you would understand it in terms of precedent setting. I mean, we've got a whole community that we have to be responsible for. But having said that, I would certainly support an extension in terms of getting you through the summer, and we can pick a date that will have to be. I hate to use the word drop dead date, but a date that we need to have some resolution on this, and I think that would give you adequate time, probably with your consultants, your accounting firm, and your banking institution. That hopefully we can come to a resolution, and it'll serve everybody's best interests. Thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much. And I agree with Deputy Mayor Frechette that I would imagine the family wants closure on this as well. And this is a tough one. It's very sensitive. Well, we do have a long-standing delinquency, and we have tried to work with the property owner through agreements that were met. This is still a long-time local business, and I know that there are people connected to it who are really trying to keep it going. And I know that nobody around this table wants to see this property go to a tax sale. And if there is a viable path forward, I think we have a responsibility, and we have also a responsibility to every other taxpayer to be fair and consistent. But if there is a viable path forward, I think we should consider it. So for me, any flexibility given, we consider it has to be structured and conditional and accountable. And if we offer relief, it needs to be tied to a repayment plan that can be met and that can work for the family. And if not, we do need to be prepared to follow through on recovery if these can be met. But I absolutely do support an extension.
Mr. Given, are you able to enlighten us as to, say, the number of tax entities in a year that are subject to penalties for late payment? I appreciate we've never had one go this far, but I take it that it's not unheard of that people don't get their taxes paid in time and they pay taxes and penalties as a result.
Yes, Mayor Ireland, you're correct that they don't typically get to this point. But administration does regularly see, so the municipality has had a tax penalty bylaw since 2003, 2004. So it's a long-standing bylaw and it hasn't been updated or changed since that time. So it's known to all taxpayers, or should be able to be known to all taxpayers. In the last 10 years or so, since maybe 2015, the municipality typically will see between 15 and 30 properties get to the point where they have the 18% penalty levied against them. So just about every year for the last 10 years, somebody runs into this 18% penalty stage. And typically that provides enough incentive for those taxpayers to come current. So yes, we do get to that stage on properties almost every year. Probably not the same folks every year, but it has happened quite often over the last 10 years.
Thank you for that. Councillor Consrew.
perhaps this is a good time to talk about the interest and the penalties. And I looked it up on AI. I don't trust AI, but maybe you can enlighten me, CAO Givens. If somebody owes $100,000 taxes and they take all year to pay, they're getting charged 3% monthly compounded. So AI says at this theory, AI says it's 142,000 owing, or $42,000 owing in interest, and then they get a penalty of 18%. So is that another 18,000? So that 100,000 that they owe turns into 160,000. And while we're talking, then that goes on their bill. So the next year they're paying 3% monthly, compounded monthly, and the penalty at the end of that year.
Mayor Ireland, I want to make sure that I'm not debating AI. I have a feeling I might lose that one. But I can clarify the way our property tax penalty bylaw works. So property taxes are due, and if they in the middle of the year, and if someone hasn't paid them by the due date, then they have a 3% penalty on July 16th, and then on August 16th, and then on September 16th. So 3% for the balance of the year. And if they haven't paid by December 31st, they receive an 18% penalty on January 1st of the next year. And then there are no penalties assessed from January to the next July. So from January of 2026 to July 16th of 2026, there are no additional sort of 3% added to that. So that's the one thing that I maybe can clarify. I won't do the math because wouldn't be as quick at doing it, but I think it's important to know that there is this, you have an expectation to pay the current year's taxes on the due date of, mid-year. If you haven't, and if you aren't in a pre-authorized payment plan, which the municipality, I'll just maybe use this as a plug for every taxpayer should be on a pre-authorized payment plan because you start paying at the start of the year and it balances those payments out through the course of the year. But if you aren't on a pre-authorized payment plan, or if you haven't paid the full amount at mid-year on the due date for property taxes, then it is 3% per month for the rest of the balance of the year. And then if you haven't paid by December 31st in full, so now you're over 6 months past due, then there's that 18%, but there are no additional percentages until the next middle of the year due date.
Okay, that helps me quite a bit. I do have to say, I like the incentive of the longer you wait, the more you're paying, so you better hurry up and pay. Unfortunately, that's where we get into the territory that I don't want to discuss right now, but I want to also mention that, like, to my knowledge, that's double the penalty at the end of a year on $100,000 that credit cards charge. And credit cards charge enough, and they don't want you to be able to pay down the principal. They like just keeping you at like always collecting interest. And I don't think that's our motive. I think our motive is like the incentive to pay, which once again comes into, if you can't pay, what can we do to help and not hurt the companies? So I think that possibly, that's our bylaw. Perhaps we should revisit that. But I think I gotta chew this over. Thank you, CEO Givens.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. If council decided to give an extension until whatever date into the fall, and there's a $720,000 balance on July 1st, what would the additional charge be? Because I do share that same concern that Councillor Waxer expressed earlier. Would it be 18? Help me with this one. $720,000. What would the fee, the additional charge be on July 1st?
Mayor Ireland, for Councillor Hall, I see Emily is here, and I'm going to maybe look to her for some advice based on what she's provided me previously. On July 1st, I don't believe there's any additional penalty, right? So as I mentioned before, July 16th is where the penalties of 3% per month, each month, start to be assessed. And to be clear, the 3% is not compounding. So a 3% penalty that's applied in July 16th is applied to the principal amount that's owing. The 3% penalty on August 16th is applied to the principal amount that was owing, not the additional penalty from the previous month. So I just wanted to clarify that, because that's been a question. And it's any penalties that would be applied in July 16th of this year would only be on the amounts owing for the current tax year. So the property's tax levy for 2026.
So if I may, it would be 3% per month on $720,000. Add it up?
Mayor Ireland, no, I don't. It's on 3% per month on the current year's property taxes.
Not sure where I want to go, but and we don't have a motion yet, which is fair. I appreciate that. And it is discussion. I just wanted to enter on the record that we have this mix of sort of a requirement to be somewhat professionally detached, but the community has never been smaller than it is on a day like today. We all know each other. We've all lived in this town for a very long time. And the degree of empathy is encouraging. I just want to reiterate that we did not get here sort of in a rush. This is a very long-standing matter. And it does concern me that it has taken to this point to get it addressed. Previous council dealt with this September of last year and had offered an opportunity which we thought might lead to an agreement. And the legislation continues to provide, and I've read the legislation at length, and it was mentioned previously, and I think in the last session, and I was not here, but I watched online, and there is a section in the Municipal Government Act, section 347, which does provide great latitude for council, if it considers it equitable to do so, to do all sorts of things. But with respect to recovery of taxes, there are about 10 sections of the Municipal Government Act from section 412 on that have really hard mandatory language. The municipality must annually, not later than March 31st, prepare a tax arrears list. We have to do that. This was not a choice that we made with respect to any particular property. We have to do that. We have to send that list. Again, it's must. Send copies of the list to the registrar. The registrar, in turn, must send notice by August 1st to all sorts of people, including people who have registered interests in the property, so not just the owner. The legislation is clear that anyone is entitled to pay the taxes. That includes anyone who holds a mortgage on the property, and mortgage companies are interested in absolutely maintaining the viability of the security that they have taken exchange for lending. And so we are proceeding based on the mandatory provisions of the legislation, and there is opportunity to settle the debt at any time. Anybody can come and pay it. And we provided an opportunity for a pre-authorized payment plan. The legislation provides that even after we might, or a municipality might, offer property for sale, that doesn't apply in the case where a municipality enters into an agreement. And the agreement can be as long as 3 years. And so, although I can appreciate a desire to show a degree of leniency, we could, before presumably July 11th, enter into an agreement. And yes, the community is coming into the high income months. Maybe there should be some payments, July, August, and September, rather than just put the whole thing off until September. It has taken the threat of a forced sale by auction to get us to this point. Here we are. Perhaps we can all take some advantage of this instance and come to an agreement. And the agreement could extend over 3 years, but somebody has to get their ducks lined up, and it's not us. And every taxpayer who has been incentivized to pay their taxes on time will recognize that maybe that isn't a hard and fast rule. And as CAO Given said, we have between 15 and 30 every year that are faced with this and pay penalties, presumably, but don't get to this stage. And so while I recognize the inclination and share the inclination to show leniency to a legacy business in the community, we are here because the legislation has helped us get here. And rather than start this all over again in September, what can we do right now? And can we encourage entering into an agreement between now and June 11th, at which time the sale need not proceed if we've entered into an agreement? The legislation provides for that. So we can, as I hear, put it down the road to September if we want it. Certainly council has that discretion. But with all the heartache that people have suffered already, maybe we can make some use of it, enter into an agreement before June 11th, start securing over a period not exceeding 3 years, repayment of all the taxes. It doesn't have to be all or nothing at some future date. So the legislation gives us that opportunity, and I'm inclined to investigate it further. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Island. And so just so I'm clear on what you're talking about, you're suggesting administration could come up with a payment plan, essentially, with the property owners that could extend over 3 years?
Yes and no. I mean, I would suggest that the taxpayer could come up with a payment plan and present it, and we could presumably come to an agreement. The legislation says each municipality must offer for sale at a public auction any parcel of land shown in its tax arrears list if the tax arrears are not paid. So that's where we are right now. And then it says, unless subsection 4 applies, the public auction must be held, and it provides for a period of time in which to hold the auction. And as I say, that's unless subsection 4 applies. And subsection 4 says, the municipality may enter into an agreement with the owner of a parcel of land shown on its tax arrears list, providing for the payment of tax arrears over a period not exceeding 3 years. And in that event, the parcel need not be offered for sale under subsection 1 until the agreement has expired or the owner of the parcel breaches the agreement. So could we come up with an agreement for June 11th? I would hope that we could. And it could extend payment over 3 years rather than put it off 3 months and then expect 100% payment. So there are other options, but I would like to get on with it because here we are. It's causing grief for council. I'm sure it's causing much more grief for the taxpayer. But it is, well, what have we got? 5 or 6 weeks potentially before June 11th to come up with an agreement that could extend over a period not exceeding 3 years. That might be better for everybody. Councillor Consard.
I feel like perhaps that's putting it off more. And I can imagine CAO Givens wants to wrap this file up. You know, what I had explained to me was the mortgager or the lender on the money would be willing to lend them the money at like a decent interest rate. So then it's out of our hands. We got our money like September 22nd, and they're happy if they are happy. Once again, not knowing all the intricacies of it and not knowing the feelings of the taxpayer. I don't really know where to go with that. And I also want to address the fact, and I'm going out on uncharted territories, but I want council and the public to know that, like, I maybe led people to believe because I have emotions and personal relationships with the proprietor. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a good relationship. You know, it's like I just want to do what's right for all the community. And that's one thing that was mentioned to me was the summer. So I don't know where that leaves us, but just had to speak to that. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Frechette.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Just a comment. I know we have a sign up provisions for all taxpayers to pay their taxes installment wise. I'm just wondering if that might be something beneficial rather than get into the legislation that would give you options over 3 years. To initiate that prior to the June drop dead date and see where we are then. It may well be that in the next 6 weeks that a lot of this becomes academic, if indeed the accounting firm employed by the Astoria Hotel and the ATB lending institution may well be finished their work. We do have some 6 weeks, 7 weeks to see where this falls. I don't know if that's a comfort for the Andrew family at this juncture, But I think we both, and I agree with all of the councillors, that we do have a responsibility to not set precedent that is going to be untenable going forward. So to come to some kind of conclusion and some clarity on where we proceed, it would be, for myself personally, I think that I would like to have a little better understanding as to why the business has not entered into that prepaid option, and indeed what the holdups would be in terms of your own personal financing. Clearly, the property has got a substantial value, and mainstream lenders, I would think, would be comfortable with this amount. And I do agree that maybe kicking it down the road further is just going to compound the issue. I think everybody is ready for some resolution and some closure. So I don't know if we've come to any definitive position on going forward here. I certainly don't feel like I'm comfortable with where we're lying with the date of June 11th, and I don't know that I'm really comfortable with the 3-year structure either. So I'm open to what can come out, what can be resolved in the next 6 weeks in terms of the business at hand, and what position we can take going forward from that.
CAO Given.
Mayor Ireland, I think I heard Councillor Frissett sort of say what payment options are available. So just for council's confidence, administration's letters, and we do have to send these letters to other taxpayers from time to time, all contain a statement that says, if you're not able to pay the full outstanding taxes, the municipality of Jasper is prepared to enter into a payment agreement with you, which can give you up to 3 years to pay the tax arrears. The form of the agreement is enclosed. Please contact us if you have any questions. So we provide that information to taxpayers that are in arrears, and that information has been provided consistently by administration to anybody that's in this condition. Additionally, previous council in September 2025 provided a extension and waiver of penalties to a broad class of taxpayers, with the condition that though anyone taking part in that program had to sign up for pre-authorized payments, and then needed to eventually make the entire amount due by December 31st of 2025. And I can report, and I think we heard one of the delegations say that they did not sign up for pre-authorized payments at that time.
In terms of responding to Deputy Mayor Frissett's sort of suggestion about potentially giving it the next 6 weeks to resolve, the legislation does provide that when we set a sale by public auction, we must give a minimum of 40 days notice, and not more than 90 days, which, I think that means if we were looking at June 11th, early May would be 40 days out, and we're April 21st. So from our perspective, if June 11th was to be an incentivizing date, it would have to be selected, I think, not later than the first meeting in May, but I'm not even sure that that gives us the 40 days. But we need 40 days lead time as a minimum. We have had lots of discussion without benefit of motion. That is called debate, and we permit that here to discuss before a motion is made. But I would encourage councillors to consider a motion that any one of them might be prepared to make. We have been back now at this for, back in session for just over an hour. If councillors need a moment to consider an option for a motion, I'm prepared to call a recess for that purpose. I see some nods as people collect their thoughts. It is now almost 25 after. I will call a recess till 4:35. I will call us back into session. During that break, I had a discussion with the representative for the taxpayer in this particular instance, who indicated that they would like on the record the fact that they have paid taxes over the last number of years. And although I'm not entirely sure how much of that would otherwise be public information at the request of the taxpayer, to divulge to council what has happened, I am going to ask Mr. Given, who has access to that information, just to let council know what taxes have been paid, and how things have got to the state they're in over the last number of years. So, Mr. Given, can you give us that information?
Sure, Mayor Ireland. So at hand, I have information back to 2020. Starting off the 2020 year on this tax roll, there was a just under $32,000 credit on the account, and the 2020 taxes that were levied against the property were just over $125,000. And there were no other payments made in 2020. In 2021, the tax levy was just over $115,000, and there were $50,000 in payments. In 2022, the tax levy was $120,000, and there was $220,735.98 in payments. In 2023, the tax levy for the year was $125,000, just over $125,000, and there was a total of $35,000 in payments. In 2024, there was a $146,000 tax levy, and there was the 1-month evacuation adjustment that was provided to all taxpayers, supported by council, of $12,000 that was applied to the account. There were no other payments made. In 2025, the tax levy was $147,000, and there was a $10,000 payment made. And in January of 2026, there was a $75,000 payment made.
Thank you for that. I couldn't do the math in my head. Do you have a total there of the total payments made in that period of time and the total taxes on the tax roll?
Mayor Ireland and for everybody watching, so I believe I've got this right. If I was off somewhere, please excuse me. So I believe that over that time, the total amount of payments from 2020 to 2026 were $434,892. The total amount of taxes levied between 2020 and 2025 were $780,186. So over that period, you can see the difference in the amount that has been levied, the just over $780,000, and the total payments of $434,000.
And of that $434,000, there was, I think you said roughly $12,000, which was the post-fire credit.
That's right. In 2024, all taxpayers of properties that were not destroyed in the fire received a credit on their account that was equal to 1/12 of the year's taxes for that property. So that was something that was received by all taxpayers, but otherwise there were no other payments applied to the account in 2024.
All right. Thank you for that. And as the taxpayer indicated to me, they just wanted to demonstrate that they have been paying taxes over the last number of years, although those taxes have been less than the amount of the taxes levied. And that was not on the basis of an agreement, I understand. That was just what they came up with. All right. That additional information is on the record. We are back essentially where we broke. We've had discussion. We've had no motion. We have had no debate because we have no motion. But if there is a motion, a motion would be in order, and we can debate it and see where we go. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. And in order for us to be able to have that debate, I would make the motion that Council approve that property subject to 2025 tax recovery notification list be offered for sale by way of public auction, and that the auction be held in council chambers of the municipality on Thursday, June 11th, 2026 at 2 p.m. in accordance with the requirement of the Municipal Government Act, and that reserve bids for properties be set at their 2026 assessed value. Having made that motion, this is a recommendation by administration. We've had debate and discussion about the date. I did indicate that it would be an opportunity for us to potentially set a date later in the year if we chose. But we need to come to a resolution on this matter. And I think, there's been a discussion on this, both for and against an extension. So for the purposes of discussion, I'm putting it on the table as presented to council, with the opportunity for other council members to now debate.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick, for the motion and for speaking to the motion. And I will return to you to see whether you want to close debate after debate. In the meantime, I will look to other councillors. Does anybody wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. And I know we aren't able to ask questions of administration during this time, but I can certainly ask you a question. If we went forward with this, would the property owner still have the option of coming up with a payment plan with administration that would then essentially just cancel this public auction?
Two things could happen. If tax arrears are paid, we are required by law to forego the auction. But similarly, if an agreement is made for the payment of taxes, my read of the legislation is that if we enter into that agreement, we would similarly be entitled to forego the auction. Councillor Hall.
One more question for you. If an agreement is made at any, I guess the agreement can be what the agreement is, but at any point could the property owner pay the whole thing off? Like, I think if there's agreement made, it's probably going to be accruing penalties as the years go on. I guess that would just be whatever the agreement is that they would come up with, but they could potentially, make a few payments on the agreed amount per month and then pay it off at the end of the summer or when they get money or when they refinance or.
Again, my understanding of the legislation, and I say this just as a member of council, not as legal counsel for the municipality or for anybody else in this matter. Any taxpayer is entitled at any time before the auction is closed, to redeem the property by paying all of the taxes. And that is their right up until the moment that the auction is closed. But the auction could also be, we could forego the auction in the event we entered into an agreement. Pursuant to the legislation, the municipality can enter into an agreement with the taxpayer for a period not exceeding 3 years. So that wouldn't necessarily require full payment of all the taxes. But if we are just going to auction anytime before that auction closes, any person can come and pay the taxes that are due. Deputy Mayor Frechette.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. So it's my understanding then that an agreement, if it's going to be structured, it would be incumbent upon the parties outside of council. They would structure the payment agreement if we entered into that option. In other words, we would the agreement is incumbent upon the party in question to structure the agreement, and we would agree to it, or do we structure the agreement?
I would propose that the legislation provides that the municipality can enter into an agreement. I would think that we are not going to go out and propose the agreement, but if somebody comes to us and says, this is what we can manage, the municipality, and in that context, not necessarily council, but administration, if they think it's a viable agreement, they could enter into it. But again, I think it rests with the taxpayer to make an offer or an agreement that is acceptable to the municipality. It's not the municipality's role to go out and suggest an agreement.
So if we choose the June 11th date, that would give the party in question an opportunity to structure that agreement and or clear off the debt entirely, either on their own or by, as long as anyone pays the taxes, and this simply just goes away, and we can tear up the auction date, and the matter would have closure.
Councillor Conscript.
I'd just like to say, in my feelings, and if it was me, I'd want the later date for the public auction, like what I was saying earlier. It would give a chance to talk to some banks and work with the banks under known pretenses, or you know what you're getting into, the way this is working. But the feel in the room is definitely to go for this and to work for the 3-year payment. I'm not going to vote for that motion, but it looks like there's enough desire in the room to vote for it, so it'll pass, I suppose. I think everybody here except me wants that, and I hope it passes for everybody involved.
Councillor Waxer and then Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I guess I'm looking again for clarification that should we pass this motion, the taxpayer it would be incumbent upon the taxpayer to come to administration to develop a repayment plan or agreement that may still begin in September. That I think it gives them, rather than us choosing an arbitrary date, as long it would give them the ability to choose a date that would work well for them, and that it would be up to 3 years, not necessarily 3 years. That if they felt that it would be appropriate and best in their best interest, they could pay it off at their earliest possible convenience. And I don't think there would be anything precluding them from paying it off at any time faster than the agreement. I think that it should that be in their best interest. But from my perspective, what I'm hearing, or what I would think I'd be voting on, is that they would have the taxpayers would have the ability to make an agreement that would work for them, with the dates that work for them, as long as it meets the our standard of fairness and equity. I think which is what I would vote for, because I think they could still set that September date in that agreement should they choose to. The date of September or June 11th is about the agreement, not about the payment. Am I correct?
Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. My question is for Councillor Consroot. Are you suggesting a potential friendly amendment to Councillor Melnick's motion around the date?
Actually, I would make the amendment of September 22nd, because the June 11th date, I feel that the taxpayer would prefer the 3-year payment plan, and they can write up a deal that, to pay over the 3 years, but administration might not like that deal, and they might not like it, but then we're right back to where we are, and there's a public auction on June 11th. Like, if they go to administration to work out a deal, and maybe administration's deal's not what they want, this way, they're paying the money anyways. This gives them time to work with administration and to work with the banks and decide, like, maybe they don't want to pay that money over 3 years. Maybe they want to pay it over 10 or 20, which is more doable. It's like, I guess I want everybody to be happy and have a good chance, and and collect our taxes. So it's just a little confusing, and it might not work out the way we intend it to if it is June 11th. If that makes any sense. Thank you.
So the question was, I think, were you suggesting what could be proposed as a friendly amendment to the second part of Councillor Melnick's motion to change the date June 11th to some other date in September? And I've forgotten now what that date is, but are you proposing that as a friendly amendment?
Yes, I will make that friendly amendment.
And what is the date?
September 22nd.
Thank you. So two challenges. Firstly, is that a friendly amendment? Does it change the nature of the motion? Is it different in substance? It's a different date. It does change things a bit. So I see Councillor Given, pardon me, CAO Given wants to weigh in on that.
Mayor Ireland, my suggestion would be an amendment is in order. If council, any council member wishes to make it, my recommendation to the chair would be that there should be a vote on that amendment, and then you vote on the main motion as amended. There may be different opinions about the date, and if you don't have discussion and debate on the proposed different date, it is materially changing sort of the direction of the motion, and there may be different opinions about the merits of that. So asking whether it's a friendly amendment is probably not appropriate in this case. Absolutely, anybody can propose an amendment. Should probably just be voted on.
Thank you. I appreciate that advice, CAO Given. My intent was to see whether or not Councillor Melnick would even accept it if it was a friendly amendment, but not to proclaim that it necessarily was. But in any event, it is something that is subject to a motion to amend.
Your Worship, I looked at the calendar, and September 22nd happens to be a Tuesday, a regular council meeting, and we leave like immediately after the municipality for Alberta Muni. If there is going to be a vote on changing the date, I would suggest it be the previous Thursday, the 17th of September, as opposed to a day that we have a council meeting. I think the reason this was set up is that the auction probably needs to occur and separate from council. And if an auction was to occur, it should probably be separate from a council meeting date. And so I agree that we should probably vote on the amendment and then vote on the amended motion as opposed to a friendly amendment.
All right. Thank you for that. So procedurally then, I would invite Councillor Conscrewed perhaps to make just a motion to amend the motion. And if you wanted to say September 17th instead of 24th, I would allow that. So it would be a motion to amend the motion by Councillor Melnick simply to change the date in the second part of that motion from June 11th to September 17th.
Make a motion to amend Councillor Melnick's motion, but it would be September 15th.
Oh.
And as opposed to 22nd. And I just want to because it was the 22nd. So isn't 7 Thursday? Okay, September 17th. And just to reiterate, like this still, I believe this should make everybody happy because like council looks in favor of this motion. The taxpayer seems to be in favor to be able to work to make a 3-year payment plan. It's just, I know sometimes that life happens and just meetings and whatever it takes, whatever professionals it takes in making the deal. And this way they could still make the deal by June 11th. But if it doesn't get done, then they can make the deal before September 22nd, which also helps administration possibly. I can't speak to that. Yeah, and it just gives a little more time, and it gives everybody the flexibility because making the payment plan over 3 years, the administration and the taxpayer may be at odds on what they think each should get. So it gives the option to get the money to pay the taxes in another way. Thank you.
I just want to clarify again the date. September 17th, I thought, was the date for the amended motion. Are we good with that? All right.
Yes.
So the motion to amend is a motion to amend the reference in Councillor Melnick's motion from June 11th, 2026 to September 17th, 2026. Councillor Melnick, I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. We cleared the confusion about the date. I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on the date that we're voting on.
All right. Is there any further debate on the motion to amend the main motion? Councillor Hall.
No debate, but I do think I can vote in favor of this because there still is incentive to get this sorted before July 15th, because that's when another more penalties will occur. And I still think there's options for them to get it sorted earlier.
Anybody else wish to speak to the motion to amend? Councillor Waxer?
Yeah, I too will vote in favor of it, but I'm very much hoping that an agreement will be made significantly earlier so that both the taxpayer and council can sleep at night not worrying about this.
Thank you for that. Anybody else wish to speak to the motion? All right, so just for clarity, this is a motion to amend the main motion to change the date. I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? There is one opposed. That is carried. So we now have an amended motion before us. Does anyone wish to speak further to the amended motion now before us? And that is in two parts. First part, to approve that properties subject to the 2025 tax recovery notification list be offered for sale by way of public auction, and that the auction be held in council chambers of the municipality of Jasper on Thursday, September 17th, 2026 at 2 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Any further discussion on that motion? Councillor Melnick, that was initially your motion with a slight amendment. Did you wish to close debate?
I would just like to thank councillors and administration for a variety of the input, and also for the clarity on how we can move forward. The option of the 3-year payment plan is at the it will be up to the owners of the property to initiate that, to work towards that. And I'm hoping that, similar to Councillor Waxer's sentiments, that this issue will be able to be resolved. I don't want to use the term to everyone's satisfaction, but I would just say that the issue will be resolved in the current year.
Thank you for closing debate, Councillor Melnick. I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? There is one opposed. That is carried. So just for clarity, those of you in the front row, extension has been granted till September 17th. So hopefully all the swimming ducks will be lined up by then. That takes us to agenda item 6.3, Jasper Offsite Levies Bylaw 2026. That comes before us for third reading. It has received first and second reading and then went to Parks Canada for certification as is required in our unique circumstances. Certification has been provided and it is back before us for third reading. Is there a councillor prepared to make the motion for third reading? Deputy Mayor Frechette?
I recommend that the council read for the third time bylaw number 276. Bylaw being a bylaw of the municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta with respect to the determination and collection of off-site levies for the development or the redevelopment of residential and non-residential properties within the town of Jasper.
Thank you for that motion, Deputy Mayor Frechette. Does anyone wish to speak to the motion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Oh, you can't vote. For the record, this was a matter that was subject to a public hearing. Councillor Hall was not present for the public hearing and therefore is prohibited from voting under the Municipal Government Act. So thank you for catching that and not voting. So that was not a negative vote. That was a non-vote as is required by legislation. In other respects, there was no one opposed to that motion. The motion is carried. That takes us to agenda item 6.4, Jasper Municipal Housing Corporation, Connaught Below Market Housing Loan Guarantee Bylaw. There's a mouthful. That matter comes by way of recommendation from Committee of the Whole, which previously looked at this and has recommended that Council give first and second reading to the bylaw, after which it will go to Parks Canada for certification and come back for third reading in due course. Is there a councillor prepared to make a motion for first reading of bylaw number 278? Councillor Roger. Thank you. That motion is that council read for the first time bylaw number 278, being a bylaw of the municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta, to authorize a loan guarantee for the Jasper Municipal Housing Corporation. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And is there a councillor prepared to make a motion for second reading? Councillor Waxer.
Council read for the second time bylaw number 278, being a bylaw of the municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to authorize a loan guarantee for the Jasper Municipal Housing Corporation.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Waxer. I see no hands for debates. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 6.5. Wildfire utility repairs phase 1 water service line valves. Again, this was before us as Committee of the Whole, at which time committee made a recommendation to council that is reflected in the recommendation as recited on the agenda. Is there a councillor prepared to make that motion to amend the 2026 capital budget? Councillor Roger, thank you for that.
The council amend the 2026 capital budget to include the wildfire affected utility repairs phase 1 project at a total budget of $2,015,000, funded as follows: disaster relief program $1,505,000, utility capital reserve $510,000.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Roger. Is there any debate? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Maybe not debate, but if I don't know if administration can provide an update if the DRP program for the $1.5 1,505,000. If that number has changed at all, or are we able to access any additional funds which would reduce the use of the capital reserve?
Go ahead, CAO Given.
Yeah, Mayor Ireland, I can speak to that. No, there have been no changes since last week. I think so this is the amount that is broadly agreed and supported by DRP program analysis as well. So the DRP, the provincial team sent out an engineer, administration worked with the engineer to go through all of the different repairs that need to be made. And these are the ones where there is clear agreement with DRP that they should be covered. And so this funding share is pretty much fixed. It's phase 2 where there's a bit more uncertainty. There are some portions of phase 2 that are on fire affected properties where we're reasonably certain that DRP will cover some small portion of that. The bigger challenge is the other parts that are not exclusively fire affected properties or that support main municipal infrastructure that's also life cycle replacement. So we are working on a report with more details and alternate funding strategies for that, but this one is pretty much fixed.
Thank you. Appreciate the update and confirmation.
Anyone else wish to speak to the motion that is before us? If not, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Councillor Melnick, I see you looking at the clock as if we're going to run out of time. We won't.
Your Worship, I'm glad that you were looking at the clock as well. I noticed you glanced over.
That takes us to agenda item 6.6. Yeah, this was a matter with respect to which there was discussion in camera at Committee of the Whole because it is a legal land matter, but we did come out of our in-camera session into open session, and committee made a recommendation that council approve the purchase of this particular property for the amount indicated, and I would look for a councillor to make that motion. Deputy Mayor Frechette.
Yes, I'd like to make the recommendation that council approve the purchase of the 1249 Cabin Creek Drive for $355,000 as presented.
Thank you for that motion, Deputy Mayor Frechette. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Takes us to agenda item 7, notices of motion, of which we have none on today's agenda. Councillor reports. Are there any councillor reports? Anybody wishes to make? Deputy Mayor Frechette.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Ireland. I just have one report just regarding with conversations that I've had with the school age community conversations committee, and they have brought to my attention that there's an inordinate number of students in our school age group that are in need of special assistance, teachers' aides, etc. And I understand that at one point we had as many as a dozen or more teachers' aides to help with children that need special attention. This, of course, is a significant concern going forward as kids get older and they get into higher grades, that the concern just propels itself and the situation becomes worse. And I just really wanted to bring it to the attention of council that this is a concern that is a perennial issue on their agenda every time I've met with them. And clearly it would be to the community's benefit that we understand this shortfall, and any kind of resolution to help mitigate the problems going forward would be appreciated by this committee and certainly by our community at large. That's all I have.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. Other reports? Councillor Waxer.
Yes, last week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I attended the Alberta Seniors and Community Housing Association convention in Edmonton. It was very informative and learned lots and had the heard lots more about the dire need for housing across the province, and some of heard from the Premier and Minister Nixon on some of their plans to alleviate some of these concerns. I also attended Friday evening the Pride VIP event. It was very well attended and wonderful to have the opportunity to touch base with many of the people who've been actively involved in planning that event, and so I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you, Councillor Waxer. Any other reports? All right, upcoming events. There is a list of upcoming events. Is there anything not on the list that should be brought to the attention of council? I see no hands indicating any other matters upcoming, which leaves us more than 10 minutes to debate whether or not we should adjourn. Otherwise, I would look for a motion that there being no further business, the regular meeting of April 21, 2026 be adjourned at 5:19. Thank you, Councillor Hall, for that motion. All those in favor? There are none opposed. We are adjourned.